Ryder.
Kathy Ryder.
I'm here on behalf
Okay. So, welcome to Lewiston, the second largest city in Maine, but the city with the biggest heart, and we are here for a workshop, two workshops. The first one on collecting sharps for appropriate disposal, and we have a representative from Tri-County Mental, or the Community, Tri-County Mental Health Services. So if you can join us up at this table, that would be great. Whenever you're,
Would you like me to start?
yeah, that'd
Okay.
be great.
Well, good evening, council members and mayor. Thank you for having us. My name's Carrie Goslin. I'm the program manager over at Tri-County Mental Health Services. And I'm also here to represent Community Recovery, which is our Androscoggin Community Response Provider Network. As you're aware, Maine is one of the national leaders for opioid drug use and overdose deaths. And Governor Mills has made it her mission to eradicate the opioid epidemic that we're experiencing here. One of the points in her 10-point plan of doing that is to look at safe removal of used syringes and to be able to provide a safe community and neighborhood for everybody. Lewiston has definitely been identified as an area that needs safety measures in place and more preventative efforts, and Community Recovery is very, very dedicated in providing intervention support and preventative work. And one of the areas that we've identified is the proposal of having safe disposal boxes throughout the town, and in the proposal there's identified 15 areas where these disposal boxes would be, so that individuals can safely dispose of used syringes for a variety of reasons why people use needles and syringes, but to make our streets safer. These areas have been identified as areas that are either there's a lot of individuals, high traffic area, areas where there's been high incidents of used needles being found by members of the community, by children, and law enforcement as well. And so it's not just about, protecting, it's protecting our first line responders, right? So our law enforcement officers, reducing the impact of them getting stuck by a used needle, and also the members in the community, especially our children, not being able to find these needles on the ground. So with that, we're asking, hopefully, that the city of Lewiston will join our efforts in approving these areas where we can have these disposal boxes in place. And if you notice, if you have our packets in front of you, as far as the cost, so what we're proposing is mail-back containers that are strategically placed throughout the city. And the price of that costing, as far as startup cost for the first year, is about $6,100. Tri-County Mental Health Services has taken the lead on actively pursuing grant funding and possibly seeking funding through Gordon Smith, the Director of Opioid Response, to assist with the first year of costs that are involved. And then subsequent years, we're hoping that the funding will be approved through the city and as well as other funders at a cost of around $4,700 annually thereafter. With respect to removing the mailback waste containers, we're hopeful that Lewiston will agree to do what the city of Portland has been successful at doing, which is having public waste employees collect and properly dispose the mailback containers. Community Recovery is committed to providing the appropriate training for the employees to make sure that we do this safely. And it would be pretty convenient because where we're proposing the mailback containers to be placed are also where the public waste receptacles are. So it would be fairly convenient for the employees to take care of. Any questions?
Does anyone have any questions? Councilor Marcotte?
The containers that will be placed around the city, what's the construction of the bag for safety that nobody gets pricked by one of the,
Very good question. So it's a safety, container, so a red box container. You may have seen some of those in public restrooms, surrounded by a secured locked container. So it's a two-part, and so the syringe would be placed in the container without further risk of being pricked, and it gets dropped in, so you can't put your hand in the box at that point.
and as much vandalism proof as it possibly can?
Correct. Definitely.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions from the council? Councilor Ray.
Thank you. So how often is the city of Portland finding that they're changing these
I believe it was on a weekly basis.
on a weekly basis? Okay. And have we talked with Public Works? Sorry.
So I was going to
Yeah.
take questions from the council and then ask for both
Perfect.
Dave and Brian to give some
Cool.
comments.
I will wait for that. Thank you.
Yes.
Councilor Lyson?
The state recently passed a law and funded it for syringe exchange. And I don't like the word needle too much because some people,
Sure.
it causes them to scream a little bit. But syringe exchange. So I'm wondering how this would be integrated with that type of a program if we wanted to do that here, where it's not just disposal, it's exchange.
I believe the goal at some point will be to look at the next step of a potential syringe exchange program, which is a very social service-based program. This would be the first step towards that direction. But right now, we're focused and committed on cleaning up the streets and trying to make the streets safer, at least for the used syringes and them being properly disposed of.
But again, it's also, the syringe exchange program is a harm reduction as well, giving people the opportunity then to exchange. And I think the narrative that's being pushed out there is that that's an enabling thing and whatever, but it's keeping people alive. So I think you ought to consider, and you got to dispose of the old ones, and you've got to, even in an exchange program, so there needs to be a disposal, and certainly this is a step in that right direction. But I think we as a community have to think a little bit more, and again, the state has established a program to allow that to occur, and with funding as well, so. Anyway.
And I can tell you that Tri-County Mental Health and the Community Recovery couldn't agree with you more on that. So I believe we are heading in the right direction. I believe that would be the next step to follow. And I do believe the city of Lewiston will be very successful at being able to establish a program where people feel safe coming and getting the services that they truly need, because we only serve, it's a very low percentage that we serve now, maybe 18%, and there's still another 35, 40% of folks that won't get the services because it's not easily accessible, where there's a lot of fear and anxiety behind it.
And I think these types of programs are also an entree to people who need references or referrals to
Yep.
those types of things. And again, I think the expansion of Maine Care in the state has allowed a lot more people to access primary care, which is an important component, too, of moving along that continuum of recovery. So thanks for your work, and I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Councilor Pettingill.
So I'm curious if out of Portland or any of these other communities, if there's data on how these are being utilized and if that correlates to less needles being on the street?
Yeah, I mean, syringes are used for a variety of, conditions, a lot of them medical, but obviously one of the biggest ones that we're suffering from right now is the opioid epidemic. So they definitely are seeing decreases in those areas as far as there's less police reports about individuals who are reporting that there's used syringes on the street, particularly in Portland. They're seeing a significant decrease. I want to say 53% decrease in calls regarding used syringes found on the ground on the streets. So it's pretty significant. It is certainly benefiting the community quite a bit.
because I'm curious. I know everybody's sensitive about needles, syringes,
Yep.
whatnot, stigmas. For me, needle use breaks down to, insulin or drugs. My favorite's finding bent spoons littered around the community. Typically, you don't find the needles with that sometimes you do. Other times there's other paraphernalia for people to use those products with. I am deeply concerned when it comes to children with these because our schools promote what should be a good program of picking up and cleaning up, but they're the ones that fall into these situations, and we don't want them handling these things. But my concern is with spending this money, if only 18% of people are using it, does that $4,700 increase if we get more people to use these services? Because that should be the goal, to get more of this stuff cleaned up off the street and to help these folks find the help that they do need. But this is the cigarette butt of today's generation. They're just everywhere. And I find it really hard to believe that if somebody's using a needle for insulin, that they're just going to toss it out on the ground and leave it. Those are the folks that I'll make the assumption and will properly dispose of that, or make the means to properly dispose of that. So I don't know, there's a great line in here of we must do more than just say no, and I completely agree with that. But I want to make sure that for the money that we're spending, we're doing the right thing, to clean up the streets and get these taken care of, and to provide these people with some help that they do need.
Couldn't agree with you more. And the 18% I was referring to is 18% that actually seek out substance use services. I think having the understanding and the focus of at least starting at this point of let's make our streets safer, and this is a good starting point in making them safer, and then that can then lend to some opportunities to take that step further, especially with Janet Mills and this 10-point plan. That's one of the 10 points, but if we can start somewhere, then we can expand on that, and the attitude, and that everyone surrounding folks that really need this kind of help and these services, and that it's not that we're permitting this kind of use, but more of, hey, we understand that we have a problem here, and this is one way of us starting to take care of that and help people.
Yep, and I agree. I personally don't think this is going to work, but I'm not in this situation.
Sure.
So for me, if I can see that data that these do work and these are that first step on that road, that helps me get to that conclusion that this is a good thing. So I don't know if we can get access to that data or provide it or whatnot.
So one thing that I just want to clarify is that we're not being asked as a city to contribute to that $4,700 up front. So I think there's opportunity for us to sort of use this as a pilot program and see, collect data over the course of the time that this is implemented, and then figure out whether or not we want to invest $4,700 at that point. I realize that the hope is that funding would be approved in the city in the future, but I think that, that would have to come back to the council, and they'd have to agree to fund that through the budget process, correct? I'm looking at the city manager, yes.
And even at that, even if that $4,700 is all taken care of, and we can allocate the same amount of money to help make that program better, if it works, I'm okay with that, because that improves the city and it improves people's lives, but having that data still helps us, I think.
So I think it'll be important to collect that data over the course of the pilot program.
Definitely.
If we don't have it already.
Even from the other communities too, they've already done the
Right.
legwork. Let's take what they've done and keep on.
Great.
Thank you.
Did Councilor Marcotte?
I'd like to hear a perspective from our police chief.
Yeah, so I actually have spoken to Brian, and he's going to talk to us give us some perspective from our public safety workers. And then I'd actually also like Dale to speak to the partnership with the sending back of the boxes.
Yeah, I was approached by Catherine Ryder with this program. So I went back, this was probably a month or so ago, so I went back about 6 months, and just to see how many calls we get at the police department for needles that people are calling. And we had over, I think it was 22 calls that we had. And these are needles that are in the parks, Samard Payne, Kennedy Park, on the streets. So what I'm doing is my officers will then respond to that location. They go over, they pick up the needle, they put it in their cruiser, and they drive back to the police station, they put it in a sharps container. When I became police chief, I put a drug take-back box in the lobby of the police station along with a sharps container. We take in about 40 pounds of drugs, prescription pills, a month in that box, and we probably change the sharps container every 2 months. That gets filled up. And that's usually the people you talk about with the insulin, or people will do that. But we're seeing so many calls to the police department, and I'm sure Public Works, Dale can come up here and probably the same thing, of needles being found. People will post pictures of needles they see, and oftentimes won't call the police and just complain about why are these needles here. I would like to see the program. I was told that it was free for the first year. If they mail it in, we'll know, they either do it by weight or by numbers of how many needles get turned in. But I think the mere fact of, I don't want kids picking up these needles, but perhaps if a parent or someone is there, they'll feel, okay, I can safely pick this up and walk 2 or 3 feet with it and put it in a box, as opposed to pulling my child away and walking away and leaving that needle there. Because if we've got 22 calls to the police department, I'm sure there's been a lot more needles that people have seen out in the street that they just haven't had it. And I'm having my officer spend time doing that. Now, what happens if the officer has a needle and then they get a call where they have to drive somewhere fast, there's a domestic or there's a serious accident, now they have a needle rolling around in their cruiser. And I don't want to install shop containers in everybody's cruiser. So I think this is a good step in the direction. I don't want to see this conversation veer off. And I know where Council Lyson is talking about needle exchange, but I'm looking at this as a safety issue for my officers and for the people who walk the streets, who use our parks in the city. Sunnyside Park, we've had needles on the Greenway. There are other issues we need to address, obviously, and that's where the community through Tri-County is working on getting people the services that they need. But I would be I'm very supportive of this program. I think we need to see how it goes for a year. It's great that it doesn't cost us anything, so I don't see why. I'd like to have Dale speak to in terms of their ability to empty these things. My concern is, same as Councilor Marcotte, in terms of, are they secure enough that they're not going to be broken into and just scattered everywhere, so then we have a whole bunch of needles laying on the ground as opposed to 1 or 2 is what we usually get called for. Thank you.
Questions for the police chief? Great.
Similar to the chief, we're seeing an escalation of needles around, a lot in flower beds, parking garage, many parks, especially along the Greenway and things. As you might imagine, there is some risk to public works employees. You can think of the flower beds, they're in weeding the flower bed and mulching, and where's a great place to hide a needle? And they come across them quite often. Unlike the chief, we are installing sharps containers in some of those vehicles that encounter them the most. And maybe a different set of tongs. We were using Coke bottles, but we're going to do it right so we can just mail them back. Again, as the chief, I'm in support of the program, with a caveat that it depends on where and how. I really think it's important, and Deputy Administrator and I have been talking about this a lot lately, the location that they are, managing against vandalism. The red mailback boxes alone are not vandalism-proof adequately. I think they need to be in a metal cage, like a lot of communities. Because I think exactly what the chief said, desperate people will have desperate measures. Dennis and I went by the other day, just a dog bag box where someone smashed that and broke into it. So they will break into them. So I think it depends on what we do it smart, do it in the right places and do it with the adequate security. But other than that, I definitely support it. I think if it's simple mailback program where we're removing the red container and it's putting it into a predefined box, sealing it and sending it off, and we certainly can do that. I'd rather have my employees doing that than encountering them in flower beds and other parks.
Questions for the Director of Public Works? Councilor Ray.
Dale? Oh, I'm sorry. I had a question, sorry. That's all right. Have you seen this list?
I have not
okay.
Until today. And I didn't realize we were doing the mail back until today. I thought they were taking care of that. This was new to, I think, both the chief and I this evening, so.
Okay.
So we're kind of on the fly, yeah. Which is okay.
Are these the locations you would expect?
Yeah, I think these are the right locations, but within these locations, I think is what we're really talking
Okay.
about. Where in the location is it well lit? Are they secure? Can the box be removed? I think it's really the mechanics of it that I'd just like to, I would hope the city would be very involved in reviewing. But yes, I believe if I gave these to my staff, or the chief looked at them, I don't know if he's seen it either, I think these are the locations we are.
And I
encountering.
imagine it might look different in different
Yeah, these
places. So if
locations
they're
came from-
outside locations, maybe having the cage as discussed would be
Certainly.
a better
And
option.
we made the recommendations for these locations.
Oh, okay, the chief
So
did.
these
Okay.
came from us. And I think Dale's talking about what post or where we're going to actually mount them. But this is based on our calls for service and where we have most of the complaints for the needles being found. So that's why we provided them with this list of locations.
Okay, great, thank you.
So we started with the locations, and I think definitely community recovery would want your input on exactly where those exact locations would be, what posts, and making sure we're doing it the right way.
I have reached out to the former Public Works Director, Chris Banch, who used to be here, who now is the Public Works Director in Portland. Unfortunately, he was on vacation, then your counterpart that's dealing with you has also been on vacation, but I think we can get some input back from Portland on the inner workings, how that works from the city side, and as soon as we do that, I'll share that with the administrator.
The only thing I was noticing about the list is that none of the parking garages are listed on here.
That's one I wanted to, I hadn't seen the list before, I think that's one we want to chat about a little bit.
Okay, great,
Because I think
thank
that's a
you.
place we're seeing them quite often.
Yeah.
But I know the chief was talking prior, that some of these locations may be the locations prior to going to the garage, so I'll chat with him.
I see, okay, thank you so much.
Counselor Pettingill?
The chief and Dale answered my question of whether or not they had input on this, and then seeing if they could, had they not, so.
Other questions? All right, so it sounds like Tri-County will connect with the Director of Public Works and the police chief on clarifying the list and sort of where specifically within those
Most definitely.
places they'll be placed and how they'll be placed.
Yes.
And I might suggest that the council might like to consider a resolve supporting this effort so that we have you on record that we can get the program started if they want to do grant applications and stuff like that, showing the city's supportive.
Do you need anything from us tonight to get?
We can do that. We can do that on the 3rd, September 3rd.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And next, we have a workshop on a draft ordinance establishing a housing committee.
Yes, I'll walk through this. There's a memo in your book under tab B. Basically, this is an idea that came forward. Actually, the council's been talking about it for some time. It was recommended by the Ad hoc Committee on Rental Registration. And back in June at a council workshop, a draft ordinance was presented that basically I put together based on some of the information that was out in the rental registration program, plus some of the standard formatting that we like to do when we establish committees. There was a discussion at that workshop where the council requested a number of adjustments. Those included adding, specifying that there would be steps to address lead poisoning prevention, including a requirement for council confirmation of the mayor's appointments to the committee, requiring that all of its members be residents of the city except for the representative of the LA Public Health Committee, changing the method of selecting the committee chair from appointment by the mayor to election by its members. Those changes were incorporated in what I've designated in here as version 2. That was the version that came to the council at its last meeting where there was discussion about it, and the decision was made to table that item to the September 3rd meeting and to schedule a workshop to deal with some of the questions and issues that were remaining. Version 3 is a version that was distributed at the last council meeting at the request of the mayor. It included the changes that were brought forward in version 2, over which I believe there was pretty much consensus, but it also made a number of other changes that included requiring residency for all positions except the representatives of the Public Health Committee unless a qualified Lewiston resident cannot be found.
who is willing to accept appointment to fill a specified position. So that was one change, that there would obviously be a priority for Lewiston residents, but that it would be, if no Lewiston resident could be found who is willing to accept an appointment, that residency would be waived for that position. And then extending the expertise requirements for certain positions to the representatives of financial institutions and the residential developer real estate professional to ensure that the individuals who were representing those groups were held a position in the organizations or had expertise that was actually appropriate for being on the committee, so that they would bring some knowledge and ability and information that the committee would find helpful. At that meeting, there was also a discussion about whether the council was interested in including a position on the committee for someone who served on the former ad hoc rental registration committee. So those were the changes in version 3. Obviously, the issue that was most debated was the question of residency and to what extent that residency requirement should be included. There was not a whole lot of discussion of the ad hoc rental registration committee, but that was something that came up at the last meeting. So there are 3 versions included in your packet. The original, the modified version that was introduced for first reading, that is the one that's been tabled. And then version 3, which represented some additional changes that the mayor requested. So the biggest outstanding issue seems to be that issue around residency. And with that, that's kind of the background of where we are at the moment. The version 2 will appear on the council agenda on September 3rd. So from that point on, any adjustments would have to be made to that document.
Councilor Pettingill.
Just clarifying question, I guess. On page 2 of the 3rd version, the definition for financial institution and then representative of an agency or firm, are those swapped? The specifics of that position appear to be, because number 8 talks about a financial institution, but then requires knowledge of a housing market and housing issues, and then you go to agency or firm that owns or operates a multi-unit property, then talks about position as of a level in nature that allows it to exercise influence on the financing, development, or operation of such property.
Yes, those were efforts to try to ensure that the individuals who were appointed had some expertise in the subject matter. So, for example, theoretically, you could appoint someone who was a clerical person at a bank or in one of the agencies that operates a subsidized housing project, who may not have any real expertise in the area. So that was the intent there, was to say there had to be some knowledge.
I'm just I'm reading number 8, and it's talking about a financial institution,
Yes.
and then it
I see what you're saying.
doesn't require any knowledge about financing.
So we might just want to match the language in those two?
Yeah,
Does
like
that-
I think that was my intent, was that phrase at the end cover both, but it probably, I should make it clear that it referred to both of those positions.
Yeah, just because with your example, it then seems to say, okay, we can put a clerk in that financial institution as long as they understand housing issues, if that's what the specificity is.
I mean, I would almost say that for 8, 9, and 10, all of that language should match. Because a developer or a real estate professional really should have knowledge of financing, development, and operation, right?
I mean, I've got
Or less so for that one?
different issues with it, but just as far as readability, it doesn't make sense.
Sure.
Okay. Would it be correct to say that the second half of each clause should be flipped? Is that right? Okay.
That's how I'm
Right.
understanding
Okay,
it
sorry.
should be.
Okay.
Yeah,
And that seems more complete to you? Okay.
it appears.
Appears more complete to you. Thank you.
Counselor Marcotte?
I thought we were prepared at the last meeting to approve the second version as we had discussed at the first meeting. And then we had last-minute amendments, which I'm assuming is what's being incorporated here. So I remain in favor of the second version. When I read these clauses at first, I was accepting Councilor Pettingill's view simply because I was seeing housing aligned with financial institution and financing aligned with agency of firm, and it made sense. But then reading into it again, I can see how it's being tied that a financial institution individual should have housing market understanding, and vice versa in the next one. So I think it's not a matter of they're in the wrong place. No, they're in the right place. But my problem with this is now, at the third meeting on this issue, we're making it that much more difficult to find these individuals as Lewiston residents. So I think it's disingenuous to create parameters that make it even more difficult to find Lewiston residents to serve on a committee that is for Lewiston.
Counselor Lyson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm in support of version 3 because of the flexibility it allows us to appoint if we can find that expertise, and that was really the issue. To me, our concern was, what if we can't find that expertise? I think this process is, I agree that on the tabling. In fact, I seconded that motion because of the newness of it, but we've had a chance to digest it over almost a month. And I think that cleaning up the language on those about that expertise, I don't think it's an attempt to non-qualify Lewiston residents. It's just to say, what do we really need? And that's what should be contained in that language, is what kind of expertise are we looking for, so that when there's a search for an appointment, they know what they're talking about, and we know what we're talking about. So I would suggest us working on that, and Ed, I don't know if you have any idea on how to do that or not, how to make those. I think people want them to be the same, right? The expertise, well, the expertise being listed specifically around housing issues within the city.
Counselor Marcotte?
The issue of cross language, I believe that the intent was cross language to make sure that an individual from a financial institution understands housing, and somebody from the housing industry understands financing, so I can understand and accept that. And I'd even accept those qualifications if they were Lewiston residents. So one or the other, either that language goes or the allowance of outside of Lewiston goes, in my opinion. But version 3, as it is stated now, I don't find acceptable. I think we can find people in Lewiston to serve on this committee who are going to vote as members of this committee for a recommendation to the council on various matters. If they need expertise, that's why you have other individuals come into the committee to present during meetings, just as we had on the rental registration. We had expertise in the audience. They were not part of the committee. I think committees for Lewiston should be comprised of people who reside in Lewiston.
Counselor Ray?
So weighing in on this, since I unfortunately was unable to get to the July meeting, I am in support of version 3. I think bringing expertise to a committee is never a bad choice. We have that a lot. I think of the Watershed Protection Commission and the folks who are managing, or who are also commissioners, and the experience that they bring to that, and how it just really improves our decision-making process. I'm super confused about the second clauses and what each person who's spoken is looking for in those. I think they could all be in agreement with each other, but if we could get the spirit that this is a person who has knowledge, and just clarifying what that expertise we're asking them of, of them would be helpful, but other than that, I'm good to go with this.
Counselor Pettingill?
So again, version 2 is the version that puts Lewiston first and puts Lewiston voters in the driver's seat. By making it Lewiston, citizens of Lewiston only, it gets rid of partisan politics, and regardless of what happens up here, it allows Lewiston decisions to affect Lewiston people, and Lewiston people make those decisions. One revision that I would like to see outside the scope of all this, on number 4, which talks about including steps to address lead poisoning prevention. I'd really prefer to see that be like item number 7 on there. Go with the tagline with healthy neighborhoods and however it's worded, but really make it lead-free by 2043. We've talked about it for many, many years and kicked it down the road. It's time for it to stop being a campaign stumping point and make it a real focus issue. This is something that affects the city from one end of the spectrum to the other, and has a real dramatic effect on everything right up to the tax rate. And then, if I could, I printed something for a different one, but as housing goes, this housing committee is going to have a lot of power in the city. On July 1st, 2019, the state of Oregon just effectively banned single-family housing. I can almost guarantee you that this housing committee will touch upon this stuff, and it adds that this is a policy in its rent control law. And it's the first in the nation, which is a phrase that's being thrown around Maine politics right now about our first in the nation stuff. Oregon legalizes duplexes in cities of more than 10,000. In cities of 25,000, it legalizes triplexes, fourplexes, attached townhomes, and cottage clusters. The bill leaves few towns where single-family zoning is still operable. Single-family zoning is a big hot-button issue right now. It's come under increased scrutiny as housing costs have soared and housing shortages have grown worse since the 2008 financial crisis. And these single-family policies have been fingered as a barrier to building housing in denser developments in those areas. And then in March, Oregon passed a state rent control law. This committee is going to come up across these issues at one point or another, and I feel it's going to be sooner than later. If we're going to be putting things as powerful as this that will change and shape the very fabric of the city, I want it to be people that live here. And I'll stand by what I said the last time. In a city of 36,000 people, if we can't find 11 people, if that doesn't count the city councilor, if we can't find 10 people that live here, there's an issue that if they can't fill these seats on this committee. So version 2 for me.
So I will jump in. So I guess, first of all, what I want to say is that, yep, we came to this meeting and we talked about version 2, and I left this meeting and I started thinking more about it, and that's how we got to version 3. So other members of this council can believe whatever they want to about that. It was a genuine effort to go back and a genuine effort in hearing the conversation that we had about the residency requirements, feeling concerned that, because I've done some research, and of the top 5 non-subsidized housing developers in Lewiston, 3 of them, which is more than half, do not live in Lewiston. And of the top 5 subsidized housing developers, 4 of them do not live in Lewiston, or don't have offices in Lewiston. They're based outside of the city. So I do have concerns about being able to fill these positions with residents. That being said, when I came up with version 3, it prioritizes Lewiston residency. It also prioritizes expertise. which, as Councilor Ray said, whenever we can have experts guiding us in this process, we should probably be doing that, because none of us on this council are experts. And then, lastly, I want to say, and I'm making this commitment to this council and to everybody in the audience here and everybody who's watching online, that I plan to appoint to these initial terms Lewiston residents in every single one of these categories. So my commitment is there. Again, I made an honest attempt at prioritization of Lewiston residency. When we look at the makeup of the committee, the top 6 members of the committee are all Lewiston residents. They're people who live and reside here. And I, support version 3. I hope that the council will support version 3. I'm making a commitment to do what I can to get at the residency concerns that other people in this council have. Councilor Ray.
Question for Ed. Procedurally, how would version 3 replace version 2 since version 2 was tabled?
Well, version 2 is the one we'll come back for the city council to consider. And this was first reading, so it would be at first reading. And the choices are, you could amend by substitution. That's the easiest way to do it. If you wanted to just adopt 3 in total, and/or you could amend sections based, if you wanted to pull some of what's in version 3 into version 2, you could amend it that way. So it could either be an amendment by substitution, which would replace it in its totality, or you could say, we want to do the amendments that are shown in items 8, 9, and 10, perhaps in some slightly different language, and that's all.
And is there a requirement of who makes the motion to bring that back? So I wasn't here to vote on the tabling.
No, I think it was tabled to the meeting of the 3rd.
Okay,
Right.
great, thank you.
And can I just ask one more clarifying question in terms
Sure.
of, because we've made the change regardless of what version we go with, that their mayoral appointments need to be confirmed by the council? When those appointments come before us, will we do them like individually or as a slate? Because,
I think they would be done generally as individual appointments where each one would have to be approved by the
so similar to
by the
how we did
council.
like the county budget committee
Yes.
folks? Okay. Councilor Pettengill.
Couple clarifying questions, I guess. When you talk about subsidized housing, what do you mean?
When I was talking about the top 5 developers?
Yeah.
So, just to give you a sense of who's on the list, so it was the top 5 assessed valuations in terms of subsidized housing projects. It included the lofts at Bates Mill and the Hartley Block, Maple Street Townhouses, Pierce Place, Birch Street Housing, Spruce Street, and Jill Street, and Bates Street Townhouses.
Okay, because as subsidized housing typically is Section 8, and then, as I understand it correctly, well, I was going to say the Xanton project is kind of an in-house deal.
I don't think it
Most of those-
necessarily means Section 8.
Most of those projects aren't Section 8 projects.
That's what I was trying to get. I didn't know if it was everybody that was some sort of rent assistance, or if it was specifically on a definition.
In my view, subsidized housing can come in 2 forms. It can be tenant subsidized, so that primarily the tenants are subsidized through Section 8. Or it can be project subsidies, such as we've seen with some of these other projects where the subsidy goes into offsetting capital costs to lower rents for at least a portion of the residents, so that the rents that are set are lower than market rate. Doesn't, again, necessarily even have to be all of them. It could be a mixed market and subsidized setting.
Yeah, that's okay. I wanted to understand what was used to define what was subsidy. And then.
So I would say not full market rate. So there were, like, Xanton included, right?
Includes everybody, yeah. And then, to go back to what the mayor was talking about with, the council approval, can that be included under the procedures, that it's done individually as opposed to
Sure,
as
we
a
could
group.
certainly put some language together to that effect.
Just to define it that way, it's not one of those gray areas.
Yeah, I think clarification on that would be helpful, because, I mean,
One-
people could have, questions about one of the appointments, but be fine with the other 10, and
Is that the consensus of the council? I'm just trying to get a consensus on that, and then Councilor Pettengill's request to make lead poisoning a separate item number 7. Is there consensus on that? Yeah. Okay, so those are two. I will prepare separate amendments for those. And we can have everything on the table on the 3rd.
Councilor Marquardt.
So I understand that creating a committee shall number 7 for lead poisoning is simply taking the clause after the comma in number 4 and making a number 7, correct?
Yeah, I might, I'll actually draft some language up and ask Councilor Pettengill to take a look at it, because I think he wanted to make something a little bit more extensive than just that.
Yeah.
And that was the easy one for me.
Can I just interrupt you for 1 second? So there might be language in the comprehensive plan around the lead poisoning
I
prevention
can take,
piece that you might want to
there
look
is
at.
some language in there, I can take a look and see what it says.
Sorry, thank you.
And the other one with, confirmed by the council, was Councilor Pettengill's request to expand on that confirmation to be individual, because the language is already there in version 2.
Where is it?
Page 1, section 2-227, the first gray underscored clause. That was added at the first meeting to be part of version 2, so it's already in version 2.
Yes, but I think Councilor Pettengill wanted to make it, effectively add, appointed by the mayor and individually confirmed by the city council.
That's what the clarification I was
Yes.
looking for.
Yeah.
Other comments? Great, so we'll take a 10-minute break and be back at 7. So please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So welcome to Lewiston, the second largest city in Maine, but the city with the biggest heart. And we are going to start tonight's meeting with recognition of the Lewiston 10U Girls All-Star Softball Team and their recent championship win in the Maine State Babe Ruth Softball 10 and Under Tournament. And we have some certificates for them, but I just want to mention that they are also known as the Lady Devils, and they battled their way to an impressive 4 wins and with no losses, advancing undefeated to win the Maine State Babe Ruth 10U Softball Tournament in Bridgeton. Angelina Valiente and Allie Irwin Michaud led the way with their dominating pitching performances, while Ava Markey and Shelby Valley provided outstanding catching behind the plate. And the entire team excelled both offensively and defensively with a scrappy attitude, which I especially appreciate, and a willingness to never give up. So I'm going to hand out some certificates. I'm going to come over here. I'll have a microphone, and someone like Dennis Dote will have a camera. It's on? Yeah, wow. So as I say your name, you can come up and shake my hand, and then if we can have you guys kind of line up around here, we'll get a group photo at the end, if that works. So Kylie Dulac. There you go. Piper Croto. Chloe Croto, a twin. Leah Johnson. Angelina Valiente. Ava Markey. Allie Irwin Michaud. Lucy Pacheco. Shelby Valley. Congratulations. Haley Marcoux. Congratulations. Isabella Enos. Congratulations. Ireland Ackley. Congratulations. Lila Terrio. I'm not going to say this correctly, but Maya Raymond? Sorry, I should not be there. And Ava Ashton. Congratulations. So can I give these to you to hand to the folks that are here? Thank you.
Otherwise, I'm. Okay. Great job. Got it.
Yeah, Lady Devils!
So now that you've gotten your certificates, you do not have to stay for the rest of this. Thank you. I know. We're losing our audience here. And And now we'll move into acceptance of the minutes of the July 16th, 2019 meeting.
Actually, Madam Mayor, we're going to ask that you postpone that until the next
Okay.
meeting because we didn't get those to you in time for
Okay.
review. What you have before you, though, is just an excerpt of the minutes for your agenda item for number 17,
Okay.
which will be needed for the reconsideration discussion.
Okay.
But the rest of them we'll get to at the next meeting for review and approval.
Okay, great,
Thank
thank you. So comment, we'll open up public comment period. Any member of the public may make comments regarding issues pertaining to Lewiston City Government that is not otherwise on the agenda. There's a maximum time limit of 15 minutes for all comments, and individual comments are limited to 3 minutes. Do we have anyone for public comment? Great. Public comment is closed, and we will move into the consent agenda.
There are, and we'll just, for the record, we'll just clarify that all roll call votes for this meeting will begin with the Councilor of Ward 1. And the consent agenda has 5 items this evening. Item number 1, authorization to accept transfer of forfeiture funds. Number 2, authorization for the city clerk to cast the city's ballot, excuse me, for the Maine Municipal Association's Executive Committee and Vice President. Number 3, amendments to the traffic schedule regarding parking prohibited on portions of Oxford Street and River Street. Number 4, appointment to the Lewiston Housing Authority Board of Commissioners. And number 5, order authorizing execution of a municipal quitclaim deed for real estate located at 16 St. Jerome Street.
So moved.
Second.
So I have a motion by Councilor Lyson, seconded by Councilor Pettingill. Councilor Marcotte.
Could we get a little background on number 3?
This is a traffic schedule amendment on Oxford and River Streets. We have had concerns expressed to us by a business that fronts on Lincoln Street, but who takes deliveries in the rear. And we've also, that they have had difficulties getting into their delivery dock because of parking on the streets. Both streets are very narrow. And when vehicles are parked there, particularly in the wintertime, when snowbanks creep out into the street, larger vehicles can't get down those streets. We've had similar problems with our snowplows and with garbage trucks, where they haven't been able to get through there. We had police and public works take a look at the area. They've contacted a lot of the residents and owners in the area, did some surveys of on-street parking and available off-street parking, and have recommended that both streets be designated no parking, with a subsidiary proposal to that in case there are shortages of parking, to add a small parking lot on what was the old St. Mary's Playground, which no longer exists, over on Oxford Street, where we could get in, I think it's 10 parking spaces or thereabouts. And so that's everybody's recommendation, is to go ahead and make those streets no parking.
Satisfied.
Any other questions for the council? To the public? Back to the council. Call the roll.
Council from Ward 1?
Yes.
Ward 2?
Yes.
Ward 3? Yes. Ward 4?
Yes.
Ward 6?
Yes.
Ward 7?
Yes.
And Madam Mayor?
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 7-0.
So I'm realizing that I forgot to do a moment of silence that I wanted to do, so if we could sort of back up, I'd like to do that.
Sure.
So I just want to acknowledge prior counselor and planning board member and county commissioner John Butler, who passed away. John was a father of 3 and grandfather of 4. He was a good friend to all. He was very involved in many civic activities, boards and committees for many years, and he always felt it was important to give back one's time for the betterment of children's lives tomorrow. And he'll be sorely missed, I think, by everybody in city administration, but anyone who's ever served with him or met him for that matter. And I also would like to just also sort of send our thoughts and prayers to the family of Jamal Hussein, who was involved in the accident on Sabata Street yesterday. So if everyone could just sort of join me in a moment of silence for those two, I would appreciate it. Thank you. Agenda item number 6.
Item number 6, public hearing on a new liquor license application for Pizza Hut
875 Sabata Street. Requested action to authorize the city clerk's office to approve a new liquor license application for Pizza Hut, 875 Sabata Street.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion by Counselor Ray, seconded by Counselor LaJoy. Any discussion on the council? To the public? Back to the council? Call the roll.
Counselor from Ward 1?
Yes.
Ward 2?
Yes.
Ward 3?
Yes.
Word 4?
Yes.
Word 6?
Yes.
Word 7?
Yes.
And Madam Mayor?
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 7-0.
Agenda item number 7.
Item number 7, public hearing on a new application for a new liquor license for Orchid Restaurant, 29 Lisbon Street. Requested action to authorize the city clerk's office to approve a new liquor license application for Orchid Restaurant, 29 Lisbon Street.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion by Counselor Lyson, seconded by Counselor LaJoy. Discussion on the council? Counselor Ray?
Sorry, I noticed this was a new application. Has management or ownership changed? Is that
Yes,
why?
change of
Okay.
ownership.
Thank you
Yes,
so much.
thank you.
Any other discussion on the council? To the public? Back to the council? Call the roll.
Counselor from Ward 1?
Yes.
Word 2?
Yes.
Word 3?
Yes.
Word 4?
Yes.
Word 6?
Yes.
Word 7?
Yes.
And Madam Mayor?
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 7-0.
Agenda item number 8.
Item number 8, public hearing on the renewal application for a special amusement permit for live entertainment for the Androscoggin Bank Colisée, 190 Birch Street. Requested action to grant a special amusement permit for live entertainment to the Androscoggin Bank Colisée, 190 Birch Street.
So
So,
moved.
second.
I have a motion by Counselor Ray, seconded by Counselor LaJoy. Discussion on the council? To the public? Back to the council? Call the roll.
Counselor for Ward 1?
Yes.
Ward 2?
Yes.
Word 3?
Yes.
Word 4?
Yes.
Word 6?
Yes.
Word 7?
Yes.
And Madam Mayor?
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 7-0.
Agenda item number 9.
Item number 9, public hearing on the renewal application for a special amusement permit for live entertainment for the Carriage House Plus, 1119 Lisbon Street. Requested action to grant a special amusement permit for live entertainment to the Carriage House Plus, 1119 Lisbon Street.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion by Counselor LaJoy, seconded by Counselor Pettingill. Any discussion on the council? To the public? Back to the council? Call the roll.
Counselor from Ward 1?
Yes.
Word 2?
Yes.
Word 3?
Yes.
Word 4?
Yes.
Word 6?
Yes.
Word 7?
Yes.
And Madam Mayor?
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 7-0.
Agenda item number 10.
Item number 10, public hearing on the renewal application for a special amusement permit for live entertainment for Spare Time Recreation, 24 Mollison Way. Requested action to grant a special amusement permit for live entertainment to Spare Time Recreation, 24 Mollison Way.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion by Counselor Ray, seconded by Counselor LaJoy. Any discussion on the council? To the public? Back to the council? Call the roll.
Counsel from Ward 1?
Yes.
Word 2?
Yes.
Word 3?
Yes.
Word 4?
Yes.
Word 6?
Yes.
Word 7?
Yes.
And Madam Mayor?
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 7-0.
Agenda item number 11.
Item number 11, public hearing for approval of an outdoor entertainment permit for the Community Concepts Day in Kennedy Park. Requested action to conduct a public hearing on an application for an outdoor entertainment event for the Community Concepts Day in Kennedy Park and to grant a permit for an outdoor entertainment event as required by the City Code of Ordinances, Chapter 10, Article 1, Section 10-3, to the Event Committee for outdoor music for the event to be held in Kennedy Park on September 7th, 2019, contingent upon positive recommendations from the Police Department, Fire Department, Code Health Officer, and Land Use Inspector regarding compliance with all regulations and compliance with all city ordinances.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion by Counselor Lyson, seconded by Counselor Ray. Any discussion on the council? To the public? Back to the council? Call the roll.
Counselor from Ward 1?
Yes.
Word 2?
Yes.
Word 3?
Yes.
Word 4?
Yes.
Word 6?
Yes.
Word 7?
Yes.
And Madam Mayor?
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 7-0.
Agenda item number 12.
Item number 12, order authorizing application and acceptance of funds from the U.S. Department of Justice Edward Byrne Justice Assistance Grant Program. Requested action to approve the order authorizing application and acceptance of funds from the U.S. Department of Justice Edward Byrne Justice Assistance Grant Program.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion by Counselor Ray, seconded by Counselor Pettingill. Can we get a brief overview from the police chief on this item?
This is a grant that we apply for every year. We use it to supplement equipment at the police department, camera system, portable radios, tasers, training, things of that nature.
Thanks. Questions on the council? Councilor Ray?
Just generally curious why our allocation is over double what Auburn gets.
Unfortunately, it's based on the violent crime. So we actually administer the grant, and based on our numbers compared to Auburn, we get double what they get.
Well, that bums me out. Thanks.
Other questions on the council? To the public? Back to the council. Call the roll.
Counselor from Ward 1?
Yes.
Ward 2?
Yes.
Ward 3?
Yes.
Ward 4?
Yes.
Ward 6?
Yes.
Ward 7?
Yes.
And Madam Mayor?
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 7-0.
Agenda item number 13.
Item number 13, ordinance amending the land use code to contract rezone the property at 2 Cedar Street, the Continental Mill. Requested action to approve introducing the ordinance amending the land use code to contract rezone the property at 2 Cedar Street, the Continental Mill, and referring same to the planning board for a recommendation.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion by Councilor Ray, seconded by Councilor LaJoy. Do we have a presentation on this item, or?
I think David is going to do a brief introduction, and Heather is going to pass out a summary we put together that specifically addresses what's covered in the contract zone change. As I know, sometimes it's all in here, but it's a little bit buried in that beautiful chart of all of the various land uses. So this is kind of a quicker summary that pulls out the major differences.
So as Ed was saying, this is a rezoning of the property, contract rezoning to the Mill District. It was rezoned, was a contract zone at one point for the Mill District, but given that all the uses have ceased and been abandoned there, it reverted back to the Riverfront District. The developer, the Chimbergs, they are interested in doing a lot more uses there, including residential of a density that wouldn't necessarily be supported by the Riverfront District. They also like to be able to do some light industrial uses, basically broaden their opportunities to use, 600,000 square foot mill building down there. So they are contracting it to Mill District. Basically, it's all the zoning uses that are currently allowed in the Mill District and some additional riverfront provisions. You'll see in the handout that you have in front of you there, it lists the uses that specifically aren't going to be included. The one caveat that would be changing from the Mill District would be the height. Currently, the height requirement in the Mill District is 100 feet, and they're looking for that to go up to 125 feet. Sections of that building are already legally non-conforming with respect to height. I believe its sections are around 108, 110 feet. So this provides them a buffer for any, improvements or anything that they would necessarily need to make to that space. It's a pretty straightforward request, giving them the flexibility they need to basically revitalize that building. If you folks act favorably upon it tonight, then we would bring it to the planning board for a public hearing and a recommendation from them at their next meeting, actually on the 26th. Moving right along here, if you folks buy along with that. There is a representative here from Chinburg that can speak to some of the uses and things that they're considering for that space.
So just to be clear, we're voting on sending this to the planning board for a public hearing.
This would be your first reading and sending it to the planning board.
Actually, this is a little bit different procedure because we're trying to move fairly quickly to support the
Right.
developer who would like to get someone into the property sooner as opposed to later for security purposes. And when you actually go and look at our charter and ordinances, you find out that we don't have to do first reading. What we have to do is introduce the ordinance at one meeting, refer it to the planning board, and then act on it at the next meeting. So the introduction, as was written into the requested action, satisfies the requirement of the code to in effect give notice that this is being considered by having it considered at one meeting, to be introduced, and then having it acted on after the planning board's made a recommendation.
Councilor Lyson?
Yes, so currently, the Code of Ordinances allows the city council to initiate any type of code amendment or rezoning. And
Correct.
that's basically what we're doing tonight.
Yes.
And that also constitutes the first reading for that as well.
It checks the box of having it on an agenda and discussed at an initial meeting.
And David, it was Mill District. Why did it go to Riverfront? I guess, I mean, I know it, but could you explain that process?
Yes, so prior to 2000, it was zoned urban enterprise down there. We did a downtown master plan where we came up with a number of new zoning districts, names you probably hear of now, like Centerville, Downtown Residential, Riverfront, Mill. That was all created in 2000. That property was zoned riverfront. As soon as we did that, we instantly made that entire building non-conforming. The previous owners we basically zoned them out of being able to do anything they could do in that property down there. Within months, we came back to the council and basically did a contract zone at that time to put it back into Mill District, recognizing that there were all kinds of uses down there that were occupying that building that we would have made non-conforming. But when that rezoning was done, it said, once those uses were abandoned, once the building was totally empty, it would revert back to the underlying zoning district, which is Riverfront, which it is today. That's great, but it doesn't necessarily help anybody looking at this property and give them the flexibility they need for residential density, for different types of light industrial uses, things of that nature.
Final question, does this list the developer agree with? I mean,
Yes,
was there
we've
any-
worked, yeah, this is their work. We've guided them through the process, but we've made sure that we're all on the same page as far as what's being proposed.
Thank you.
Counselor Ray?
And as was the case with last time, would this property revert back to Riverfront?
That language is not specifically in here, but there is language that's in our ordinance, in all of these documents, that says if the property owner ever fails to operate in compliance with the rezoning document in any fashion, it will revert back to the original underlying district. So while it's not as specific, we purposely did that so we wouldn't have to run into this situation again.
Okay.
But if they did something totally inappropriate down there, or somebody else came in and just said, I'm abandoning the property and I want it to be riverfront, it would simply revert back to that at that point.
Great, thank you.
Counselor Marcotte?
Understanding that this is a negotiated agreement, I'm noticing under the second grouping of would not allow, commercial, back up one, private industrial, commercial developments. Is that something that if the owner of the property would like to seek in the future, that this contract zoning can be changed?
Yes, but they probably wouldn't, because that's definition specific to developments that have access off private roads.
To what?
Private roads.
Okay.
So if you wanted to do like a commercial subdivision, private commercial subdivision, and they had access off a private road, that use group is specific to developments off of a private road. So in all likelihood, it would never be applicable. But to your point, if there was a use that wasn't contemplated, this property owner or another property owner could go through this process again and add or remove a use.
And if this property owner sold the property, the contract zone would continue to the next
That's
owner?
correct.
Other questions from the council? To the public? Back to the council. Call the roll.
Counselor from Ward 1?
Yes.
Ward 2?
Yes.
Ward 3?
Yes.
Ward 4?
Yes.
Ward 6?
Yes.
Ward 7?
Yes.
And Madam Mayor?
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 7-0.
Agenda item number 14.
Item number 14, public hearing and order approving the establishment of Blake and Pine Tax Increment Financing District and Program and approving of the joint development agreement between the city and Blake and Pine LP. There are 2 items for requested action. The first item is to open and hold a public hearing on the proposed Blake and Pine Tax Increment Financing District and Program. And you don't need a motion for that. You can just open the hearing if you'd like.
So we'll open the public hearing. Would anyone from the public like to speak on this item? Should we have Link do
I was going
the,
to say, I could give I guess I'd like to give an outline of it.
Great.
And then, so the public has something to respond to.
that would be great, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Happy to be here tonight. This is a project that's been in the works for a better part of a year. There is quite a few folks behind me who are involved with this. We've got Catherine Elliott, who has been the project manager for Avesta, who's here. Dana Topman, who's the director. Rebecca Hatfield, also with Avesta, I think in charge of real estate development there. We've got Paul Gambro, who I believe just got up to speak from CCI, and the 2 architects, Gabby Russell and Tom Platt. So a lot of folks have been working on this. It's a 35-unit, $7.4 million mixed-income project. 28 apartments are going to be workforce housing. 7 of them will be market rate. They're really targeted. Those 28 units are really targeted people either making 50% of the area median income based on household size or 60% of the area median income. It really varies by household, but trying to boil it down for a 50% area median income, for somebody living in a one-bedroom, you'd have $22,700 is the income these folks would be at. If you've got a four-person household, perhaps in a two-bedroom unit, the income that they'd be capped at would be $32,400. And if it was a six-person household living in a three-bedroom, it's $37,600. See, these are working folks who are trying to make a go of it. This is creating safe, decent, affordable housing for them. Avesta's got a wonderful track record around the state. They've got about 1,500 units that they have developed and manage. The incomes go up with the 60% income. You know, it's $27,240 up to $45,120 for a three-bedroom unit. So again, these are pretty good projects. This is also an expensive site to develop. This was one of the buildings that burned back in the fires from May of 2013. The building was torn down, but there's underground storage tank, there's pollution in the soils. Some of the estimates they've gotten, I know my memo to the council referenced to $500,000. I actually got an update from Avesta to remove the underground storage tank, deal with the contaminated soils, and put a cover system of it. It's $575,000 is the estimate. So this is on top of construction. You've got other extraordinary costs. Let me get into some of the financing here. Basically, they've got a low-income housing tax credit allocation. They already received that from Maine Housing, but because of those extraordinary site costs, they have requested both tax income and financing support as well as home support. The tax income and financing support will be used to help offset the operational costs on the project. And let's see, there we go. So this is something really required by Maine Housing, and if you can really zero in, really teeny tiny, this is right up the corner of Blake and Pine. It's one block up from Kennedy Park. This is one of the requirements of the state statute. This is actually the district. You know, it's a relatively small parcel, and that's where the TIF district itself will be created. The way the tax increment financing will work is what we're recommending, city staff is recommending, is a 15-year TIF where 50% of the tax revenue generated, new tax revenue generated, will go back to the project. Looking at the spreadsheet, it's currently assessed at a little over $47,000. Bill Healy has looked at it, estimates that the value will be $1.6 million. At assessed valuation, you subtract the existing value from the projected value, leaves you as a little bit over $1.5 million will be the increase in assessed valuation. About 50% of that will be going back to the developer to help with operational costs. When you put it against our current mill rate, it works out to $22,253 annually that would go to the developer, and $22,253 would stay with the city and go into the general fund. Over the course of the 15 years, it's almost $334,000 that each entity would receive. In all likelihood, the mill rate is going to change. I suspect the assessed valuation will not change dramatically unless we have a big reval, but these are reasonable estimates of what it could do. Another benefit of tax increment financing is any assessed valuation that you give back to a project is called the captured assessed value. It does not count on the total valuation that the city has. The total valuation that the city has determines how much we pay in county taxes and how much we receive from the state for state revenue sharing and state aid for education. Again, one of the requirements, statutory requirements, is you have to calculate what sort of tax shifts those would be. As far as county taxes, we'll pay, but for this project, we would have paid $244 more in county taxes if we chose not to TIF this. We would receive $1,017 less in revenue sharing and $6,178 less in state aid for education. So over the course of the TIF, the 15 years, by sheltering it, we'll retain about $111,584 of revenues that would otherwise have been spent on county taxes or not received by the state. They're also asking for a home, which we can only ask you to conditionally award at this point. There are a bunch of rules associated with the provision of home dollars. Home will really help them construct this project. It's help to pay for some of the construction costs. We have to go through a HUD-regulated environmental assessment, which is way beyond what we typically see for Phase 1, Phase 2 assessments. And we need to make sure nobody does anything until we've checked off a bunch of boxes as far as the environmental assessment and finding the other financing and making sure it meets our underwriting criteria. Once we've gone through that exercise, I'll be back in front of the council asking you to approve a home agreement, which lays out all the statutory requirements that needs to be in it, says how many units will be designated as home. I expect we'll be back in front of you within a month or two if you decide to go forward with this project. But tonight, just to give Avesta some comfort that council likes the idea, is willing to do it, we're asking that you also, it's written in the joint development agreement that we would conditionally award those grant document, the home dollars. One mistake, which I must say was pointed out to me by Avesta in putting together the council packet, my memo referenced a 15-year TIF. The documents that went to Maine Housing referenced a 15-year TIF, but the actual council order referenced a 20-year TIF. So I've printed out a bunch that literally changed the word from 20 years to 15 years, but my thanks to Avesta for making me aware of that mistake on my part, and just wanted the council to be aware of that for clarity. It is a 15-year TIF that we're looking to do. And with that, I'm done. I would say let's open it up for any public comment or council questions.
Great, so back to public comment period.
Yes, good evening, folks. I'm Paul Govero. I live here in Lewiston, and I'm on the board at Community Concepts, and I also chair the Housing Subsidiary Committee at Community Concepts. We are fully supportive of the proposed TIF and home funding for renovation of the parcel at Blake and Pine. I want to first of all thank each and every one of you for your public service. Many years ago, I served with Councilor LaJoy in the legislature, and I understand and appreciate the hard work and dedication you folks put in, not always to great aplomb. And I want to congratulate and thank each and every one of you for the work you folks do. Lynn Jeffers has done a magnificent job, as usual, in describing with precision and clarity the contours of the TIF and the proposed use of home funding for demolition to get the project ready to go. This is a small part of a much larger picture, as the council's aware, as the city of Lewiston goes forth on this remarkable project to revitalize its 30-block downtown area known as the Tree Street area. And we hope in the next 5 years to develop literally hundreds of units of affordable and safe housing. The key here is to make downtown Lewiston what it was for many generations, a safe and welcoming community where people can raise their families, kids can feel safe going to school, get necessary supports, get health care, beautify the area, have a host of amenities, gardens, and lots. I'm old enough now, I'm 71. I can recall Lewiston when I was a young boy, and I can recall how healthy these neighborhoods were. And I really commend the extraordinary efforts of hundreds of people in this community who have really come together and are on the cusp of a remarkable project. We do have people here who know far more than I. If you have questions, technical questions, Dana Trotman is here, Catherine Elliott, I think the architect Tom Platts is here, and Gabriel Russell, and many others also. But I'm happy to answer questions you have now, but I want to assure you that the CAP agency, the Community Concepts, is 100% behind this proposal. Thank you.
So do we have others for public comment?
Good evening, Mayor Cloutier and council members. I'm Dana Totman, and I'm with Avesta Housing. And guess first and foremost, I just really want to thank you for considering this request and working with us to get it this far. This really is an exciting development, and we think quite pivotal to the redevelopment and rejuvenation of this part of Lewiston. I also really want to thank Link and Misty and the other city officials who have been incredibly supportive and helpful in guiding us through this development. Just to be clear, our role is to be the development consultant to Community Concepts. We have created a partnership with Community Concepts where we can bring our talents and skills and abilities and combine that with their history and their knowledge and their appreciation for the unique characteristics of this neighborhood and all of Lewiston to make this a good development. We really have been eyeballing sort of as have many, the needs of Lewiston and this area in particular. And it was a few years ago that the Community Concepts officials and other Lewiston officials asked us if we might come assist in some way in creating newer, affordable, accessible, decent housing, particularly in this neighborhood that needs it. And we're all well aware of what has happened over the years with the fires. And we just are thrilled to be part of this rejuvenation effort. So we think these 35 affordable homes will be a good start. There's been some good starts. There's a lot of energy. There's a lot of momentum going here. And we really think that this development in particular will be quite helpful. Our organization has about 100 developments around Maine and southern New Hampshire. We've done probably 30 or 40 tax credit developments. We have a couple of assisted living facilities. This is our sweet spot. It's our expertise. It's what we do. We know how to stack up and layer these various financing mechanisms and to bring them together. But at the end of the day, what we're really trying to do is to create safe, decent, affordable housing for people in need. So we're thrilled to be here. I think Link has answered or has outlined many of the key provisions of what's in front of you. Catherine Elliott is with me here, as is Rebecca Hatfield. We can answer any technical questions that either you have now or that might be helpful at the end of the public hearing. But we're pleased to answer questions. We're thrilled to be part of this development, and we really do relish our relationship with Community Concepts. So thank you for considering this.
Thank you. Anyone else for public comment? Then we will close public comment period. And Kathy will read the second.
Yes, so the motion, the next item for requested action is to adopt the order approving the establishment of the Blake and Pine Tax Increment Financing District and Program and approval of the joint development agreement between the city and Blake and Pine LP. And we'll also note the change in the fourth whereas to go from 20 to 15 years. We'll just incorporate that into the order.
So moved.
I have a motion by Councilor LaJoy, second by Councilor Lyson. Councilor Marcotte.
I have several questions and comments. First one, Mr. Jeffers, last night at the planning board, someone asked a rather astute question. TIFs, do we permit TIFs to individuals who may be building $200,000 homes here in Lewiston?
Typically, no. We have not. It doesn't hit the threshold. The city has a TIF policy of at least a $2 million level of investment, and there are two types of TIFs. One is for affordable housing, the other is economic development TIFs. And somebody just building a private single-family home would not qualify under either state statute. Although, I want to note, well, I shouldn't say if they're building a $200,000 home, they wouldn't. We have plenty of other federal dollars that do flow to downtown property owners in the form of CDBG loans, private loans to lower-income homeowners. The lead dollars that have been flowing is $10,000 a unit, so we do have federal dollars flowing to other entities, not in the form of tax increment financing.
When I look at a project that is slated to be a $7 million project, 35 units, 200,000 each. Not long ago, that could have been 300,000, but certain rules were changed. And because of the way that properties are assessed, if there were no TIFs involved, we'd be looking at $45,000 worth of revenue, and that would be it. The request here is for half of that in order to make the numbers work. $22,253.08. That really does not cover the costs that will be incurred by adding this project to the city of Lewiston. There are costs for all the services that we provide, and it will undoubtedly exceed $22,253 a year. If we were to compare that to an average home, I'll use $100,000 because it's easier than the $150,000 we usually use. The individual who with a $100,000 assessed home would pay $2,867 a year. The revenue to the city here translates to approximately $635 per unit. That's just not fair to the taxpayers of Lewiston. We don't need to open our arms to more impact to our treasury and our tax rate. We're sitting under a burden currently. As a matter of fact, recently we've seen a decline in our Moody's rating, and a lot of that has to do with our debt and things that we need to bond each year. I don't want to be bonding another wing to a school building. I don't want to be having to add large infrastructure items to, but we have to, in some cases, fire and police. Everyone knows that we're building a new substation on Sabata Street, and the other two are slated hopefully sooner than later, but some of them are getting stretched out because of our debt burden. For those reasons, I can't support this. If it was coming in at $45,000, I'd probably have no choice because they'd be fully within the rules. There would be nothing for us to decide here. But as far as providing a 50% TIF, there should be some other way to make the city whole and participate as anybody else would in the process of home ownership. Thank you.
Anyone else in the council? Councilor Ray.
I might be being obtuse here, and I apologize, but on the third page of the agreement, when we're talking about current assessed value, the year is now 2022. Is that because assessed value for 22 would have tax implications for 2023? Because that's when the TIF starts?
Yeah, and what was included in your original package, sort of the deep attachment we sent was to Maine Housing. That was created before we had amended the joint development agreement. So you had both the TIF application, which included the joint development agreement, and then the joint development agreement was also included in your council packet, which referenced different dates. Is that what you're getting to?
Yeah, I think, well, when we're talking about assessed value, it says 2022 to 2037. The TIF implications look like they're a year later than that. So 2023 to 2038.
And they are, it's April 1, 2021 is tax year 2022. And I think it's the year it ends is what we call our fiscal year in the tax year.
Yeah.
But the year, the value is created at the beginning of the year, not the end of the year. I think that's.
Yeah, that clarifies.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep.
Other questions on the council? Councilor Lyson.
I did some quick math. With the tax shift of 111,000, basically that would then reduce the not liability, but loss of income from the city on that.
Yes, it does help. It does help.
222,000. I did a rough calculation. That's less than $15,000 a year less revenue for those 15 years. And then after 15 years, it would be 100% of the revenue would be coming to the city. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So, again, we're in order to get this project going, and we all know how projects like this, even if they're market rate, need cooperations from cities and investment from the city. So I'm fully in support of that. TIFs have been controversial within this council. I don't think this one is controversial at all, not to me. I think it's laid out well and clear, and a very difficult site to develop. And I think we're fortunate that there's people who want to work on this and invest in this and, do the work. So, and single-family homes can also take advantage of the biggest tax break that, our government allows, and that's writing off interest income for single-family homes. So that's the biggest subsidy, by the way, housing subsidy there is. And I know I've been called the carpet before by calling it a subsidy, but it is. And I agree with it. I think it's good policy, and I think this is good policy, too. Thanks.
Other questions or comments from the council? To the public? Back to the council. Call the roll.
Counselor from Ward 1?
Yes.
Ward 2?
No?
Ward 3?
Yes.
Ward 4?
Yes.
Ward 6?
Yes.
Ward 7?
No.
And Madam Mayor?
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 5 to 2.
Agenda item number 15.
Item number 15, order approving the use of a portion of the city's tipping fee credit and use of $135,000 in available demolition funds to remove several distressed and blighted buildings in the Choice Neighborhood Plan area. Requested action to approve the order approving the use of a portion of the city's tipping fee credit and use of $135,000 in available demolition funds to remove several distressed and blighted buildings in the Choice Neighborhood Plan area.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion by Councilor Ray, seconded by Councilor Lyson. Question? Oh, Misty, would you like to give us an overview?
Sure. LA Community Housing, this Community Development Corporation underneath Community Concepts, has been a partner with our Choice Neighborhood Planning work, and they have moved forward with acquiring the replacement sites necessary that are outlined in the transformation plan to redevelop Maple Knoll. As part of that work, they have acquired a few parcels that have some distressed buildings on them that are currently vacant. Community Concepts has worked with the tenants that were legally residing within these distressed buildings to help relocate them to better housing. However, these buildings that they have acquired have consistent code violations and some significant health and safety issues that have been there, so they have secured the vacant buildings at this point. However, they really need to be demolished, and the challenges of having and securing vacant buildings as well as trying to insure them is a significant risk, and so they are inquiring the assistance of demolition funds. The city has a long history of doing demolition work within the neighborhood, especially safely, and so they're hoping for support with the demolition as well as the use of some of our tipping fee credit from our re-energy lease agreement. Through this lease agreement, the city has approximately a tipping fee credit of about 3,000 tons of wood debris. And in most years, we're using around 1,000 tons of this credit. And during the peak of our demolition work in the past, we've used approximately about 2,115 tons. And so we feel there may be some room to utilize that tipping fee to help with the demolitions and reduce the cost as well. So, thank you.
Questions from the council? Councilor Marcotte.
I don't see a map in the packet. Where exactly is 107 Bartlett, 119 Bartlett, and 42 Walnut?
Yep. So 107 Bartlett Street is about mid-block between Pine Street and Walnut Street. It is a 3-unit building that has a attached barn that's actually falling in on itself right now. That building has been vacant and condemned for several months due to that barn issue. The 119 Bartlett Street and 42 Walnut Street are 2 buildings on the corner of Bartlett and Walnut. They are about 9 units.
This would be the corner, when talking about Pine, where the old Fahey funeral home was?
No, this parcel is on the other side of that block, on the same stretch of Walnut Street that Poirier's is. It's just adjacent to that same
But the next
block.
street up would be Pine, correct? The next street towards Main Street would be Pine.
Yes.
And Fahey's building is still standing at this
Yep.
time, and across the street would be Cody Brothers Car Repair.
Correct.
Okay. That's all for now.
Other questions or comments from the Councilor Patton Gill?
The buildings that are being torn down, are these being rebuilt upon at a later date?
Yes, this is within the replacement site too, and so it's slated that this would be part of about 64 units over a larger area, of anywhere ranging from about 2 to 4 unit buildings, and there is a 13-unit building proposed on a different site.
And what's the in-between time from when the buildings go down to when they're redeveloped?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So it's still a few years out from redevelopment, which is why one of the concerns about having the vacant buildings for such a long period of time is so pressing. We still need to work with our partners to, we have to do the, preceding the demolition, we would need to secure financing, as well as some site design and permitting. And as part of this, we are hoping to seek choice implementation funds, which we would not be applying for until about a year from now.
Okay. With that, I'd hate to see more buildings come down in the downtown and then have a row of rocks and then nothing but weeds and some dirt and rocks. Is there any thought to dress these sites up in the sense with temporary landscaping? Because we all know that these sites, once they come down, they're an eyesore, they don't contribute anything to the neighborhood.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff that, like Bernice Rattle, I believe her name is, down in Buffalo, New York, is done with either community gardens, temporary installations just to make use of the space while it's in limbo. I think it would go a long way to adding some intrinsic value back to it in the in-between time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Councilor Ray?
Thank you. So I also had the same curiosity that Councilor Marcotte had, but looked it up on Google Maps. I think it would just be helpful in the future to have a map. That would be great. And then I don't know if this is a question for you, Misty, but is it possible to hear what the remainder of the acquisition and demo fund would be after removing this, just so we know where that stands and if there's other emergencies that they're covered for? I'm sure that's been thought of, but it would be helpful to know the status of that fund.
Heather's looking it up, so you don't have.
$1,121,567.
Thanks so much.
Approximately.
Just about.
Makes sense.
Thank you.
So glad to have
14.
So is the police chief still here? No, okay. So I asked because I wanted to mention that I had a conversation with him earlier today about these properties and the safety risks that they pose by remaining where they are. So I think while there is some time between the demolition and the rebuilding, I think it is important for us to take these down relatively quickly. But I do appreciate Councilor Pettingill's comments about sort of trying to figure out how to do some infill, maybe some landscaping, maybe some temporary art installations.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I know that that's sort of right in line with what the transformation plan talks about, so. Other questions from the council? Councilor Marcotte?
Under the council order, there's a whereas, given the conditions of the existing buildings located on 107 Bartlett, 119 Bartlett, and 43 Walnut, and the outstanding code violations that have persisted under past ownership, demolition is necessary. that tends to suggest to anybody looking at this document that those code violations had not been corrected in recent years. Is that not the case?
A number of these properties have been subject to repeat notices violations over the years. The improvements were made, but again, these are properties that have aged, not had a lot of maintenance to them, some rough tenants in them. It's a constant maintenance and challenge for the landlords. They have been addressed at this point. I think Misty mentioned all these properties are now vacant, they're secure. That's one of the things that the new owners have to be responsible of, is making sure that they are secure while they're vacant out there to, prevent any vagrants or anything from happening.
So those issues had been addressed, and LA Community Housing now owns the properties?
Correct.
So they purchased the properties from whoever the previous owner was?
Correct.
And they want us to pay the cost of demolition on the taxpayer's dime, as opposed to taking them down themselves. The reason we have $1.1 million in the fund, not only because we fund it every couple of years, many of the banks that take ownership of the properties that people have defaulted on end up reimbursing us for those amounts. That's why the fund has replenished. The private sector pays for those demolitions eventually, unless there's absolutely nobody there to do so. And I really have a hard time with just taking money out of the Lewiston taxpayers' pockets to build another project similar to the last agenda item a couple of years down the road with the same sort of track record. There's going to be requests for home funds, there's going to be requests for TIFs, there'll be a larger impact to our services and increase our tax rate to cover that. At some point, there won't be anybody left in Lewiston to pay the tax bill, especially if we don't start bringing commercial enterprise, because TIFs for commercial enterprises make sense. Housing, it doesn't.
Anyone else on the council? To the public?
Sorry, my name's Shanna. I'm Shanna Cox from 119 Ash Street. I just came off of 3 hours of a barbecue directly next to one of these properties that's being discussed tonight. We fed 250 people from the neighborhood and from beyond the borders of the neighborhood, and we heard over again concerns about the safety of the neighborhood and the safety of the housing. There's a lot of kids there, and their parents were talking about their concerns for the safety of them. And so I think the issue in front of you today on this particular agenda item is whether or not we're going to remove the unsafe substandard housing that has been the subject of this council's desire to remove, right? The conversation we always hear is about, you're going to build more, but when are you going to remove it? Today, I think in front of you is a request to remove the same housing that you are concerned of, that my neighbors are concerned of, that parents are concerned about. And so that's, I think, the issue today. And the question about who is paying for that, while this seems like one transaction and one piece, and it is, because your requirements of how the city does business requires it to be that way, this is linked to LA Community Housing taking on significant risk for managing these plots of land, for taking care of this property for a number of years, for undergoing a complex financing process to then create new replacement housing, and in some cases, replacement retail. Retail brings in tax dollars, as does the affordable housing projects in our community. Every single one of them adds to our tax base, and they add at a rate higher than those empty lots or those dilapidated buildings would on any day. Not to mention that this is the opportunity to be a catalyst for significant change that also increases private investment, which can come from the commercial sector, but is not the only sector that provides taxes for the city. So I would hope that this council considers this and the opportunity, not just to remove these, but when a bank owns a property, they don't maintain that property. And these properties will not only be maintained, but they will probably have wildflowers that help remediate the lead. They'll have the lead in the soil tested. They'll have public art, and we will activate those lots like we did this evening on a lot that had been vacant and the one that was city-owned right next to it. You won't get that from a bank because they're not in the neighborhood and they're not shouldering the risk that this group is. So the commitment from the city to use those tax dollars that have been set aside for this purpose to remove these buildings in exactly the place and for exactly the reasons you have asked, I hope will be supported tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else for public comment?
Yes, good evening again, Paul Govro. I'm on the board at Community Concepts, and I'm also the chair of the Lewiston Auburn Community Housing Corporation that CCL oversees. It will be hard to describe the wretched condition that these parcels we acquired were in. And it degrades the very essence of human dignity in terms of having people live there. Those units pose imminent and serious public health threats, safety threats, and it's a prudent action to demolish those properties with due dispatch. And I can assure each and every member of this council that CAP and Latch are committed to attracting responsible owners and landlords who will make sure that we treat the residents of these new parcels with the dignity and respect that they are entitled to. This has been a horrible chapter in this city's existence, and we hope, with the great work of so many people, to put that behind us and move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else for public comment?
Hello, I'm Kim. I live a couple buildings up from there, and I see a whole lot of that stuff going on. I was at the barbecue, by the way. Totally awesome. Keep it up. So I heard people kind of thinking about what could we do with an empty lot for a little while. Well, I can personally tell you I haven't seen this many dogs in residential housing in any city that I've ever been in. I have a dog myself, and it is a struggle for a lot of dog owners. And I was curious about if anybody thought about putting a chain link fence up with a couple gates and allowing people to exercise their animals, socialize them. I think that there would be a lot less aggressive behavior on the part of the animals. It would be a great way for the downtown neighbors to get to know each other a little bit who do not have a vehicle. I have a vehicle, and I go to the dog park every chance I get, but that's a long ways away from where I live. And I also walk my dog around the neighborhood, and I meet a lot of fantastic people. And I think that if these dogs are part of who our family is, and they're super important to us and our children, they offer enrichment and engagement, it would be super neat if we could come up with a little bit of grass, put a chain link fence, put some rules up about, aggressive dog behaviors, contact information for ACO for Wendell Strout, and some basic things like that. I personally have only been in Lewiston for 5 years, and I've seen some growth that I really never expected. I trained aggressive behavior dogs over at the Humane Society. I volunteered to help local people understand better how to handle their animals when they encounter another animal in the street, exactly what to do. I'm just thinking that just might be really awesome. Just a suggestion. Thanks.
Anyone else for public comment? Back to the council. Councilor Marcotte.
I heard the word sad chapter. That sad chapter comes from some of the actions we've taken over the last 50 years here locally and socially right up through the federal level, beginning in the 1960s with some of the programs that were put in place. We took away the need for home ownership. We created opportunities for corporate landlords to come in, whether they were good stewards or bad stewards of properties, and these properties weren't maintained. I've watched, Maple Knoll was a project approximately 1980, and I have family members that lived there when it was rehabbed back then. We're already having to rehab it again 40 years later. The buildings that were there prior to were there for probably about 80 years. So is the next generation going to be 20 years? None. Really, none. Again, the problem I have and a lot of my constituents have is flipping the bill for people to live in $200,000 homes that cannot possibly afford it. It's subsidized, whether it's subsidized through the manufacture of the homes, federal grants, Section 8, whatever the subsidy might be, only to come up on the same fate in short order. We have plenty of residential homes that are vacant in this community. People who have retired, gone to Florida, thought they were going to sell the houses, they become abandoned, the copper's stolen, the roofs are caving in. These homes probably assessed in the neighborhood of $100,000 to $150,000. They're not $200,000 homes, and they're just sitting out there vacant. Why don't we do something with those? That's something that a lot of people share with me from time to time. You're talking about I heard 64 potential units in this area that we were speaking about. That's $12.8 million at $200,000 per unit. Where is that money going to come from? That's going to be some huge asks from various sources. I'm not sure that the federal government in a few more years is going to be able to survive the burden of $23 trillion and growing. Yes, it would be nice to have these buildings down. We take down buildings when we have no choice. Nobody's taking responsibility for. Someone has taken responsibility for these buildings, and the ask is about $135,000. The current owners should be finding another source other than the Lewiston taxpayers to come up with this $135,000. Thank you.
Any further comment from the council? Councilor Lyson.
Yeah, obviously I disagree with Councilor Marcotte. We spend so much money demolishing buildings without a plan, without anybody taking responsibility. Here we've got a situation where, and we had some great speakers, and I think we all should be happy for them, because I don't have to talk as much as I plan to. But I just wanted to emphasize, I think this is the right way to do it. We have people interested in the redevelopment and the care of these properties, and a lot of them are the most impacted people. And I think it's time for Lewiston to invest in its community. You may not think we've done it the right way. I think this is the right way. And again, you make the cost of housing wherever you are, especially when it's trying to meet the needs of low and moderate income people, need some support from the municipality, the state, and the federal government. That's just the way it is. It's good business. It's good business. It makes sense. It's good policy. As I said before, these people need to live in safe, affordable, and decent housing. And we have a lot of people in this community who are not. And that's a problem. That's our responsibility. That's why people come here, is to have that ability. And again, I believe in the hand up, and I believe in investment in people. Again, this is just another example of it. And I think that to kind of fall back on there's a lot of those people that you talk about that live in single-family homes. There's a lot of those retired people who are in support of these things, too. Not everybody is saying, I can't, you're stealing from me and I can't afford it. I think our community can. I think during this budget cycle, there was some questionable unknowns about what the state was going to do and what we were going to do. And, some positive things are happening. I think that we need to invest in our community, and we need to do it now. And in housing, it's been long overdue. And I just, tend to, the naysayers of investment in housing or investment in anything in the downtown, I think we need to break that mold of the suburbs against the downtown and understand that it's our city, it's all of our residents, and we all deserve to live in decent housing. And obviously, there's some seniors and other people who need assistance as well. And again, some of those will be moving into some of these places as well. So it's not them, It's us, it's all of us, it's our city. And I think we need to make sure that everybody lives with dignity and respect.
Councilor Pett.
So I'm going to change gears. The dollar amount to take these buildings down is a drop in the bucket to what the fund is. Regardless of who pays for it, when it happens, what happens, those buildings are going to come down, especially if they're derelict and abandoned. They are a safety risk. I'm actually more concerned and impressed with the community involvement in that, in the lot activation. It's a favorite word for placemaking people. It talks about bringing areas of the city that have been neglected and left behind and bringing them back to life and bringing people back to them. Because ultimately, cities are built for people. They're not built for anything else other than people. You know, this will bring back investment. This gets people out of their homes, out on the streets, utilizing the city, getting fresh air. You know, they come out, they come together in positive ways, such as a barbecue or socializing their dogs out of their house, which is fantastic. I had an idea in my head, some grass, some trees, maybe some benches. It looks nice, but a dog park, people are going to use that. It's a temporary installation. It can come down. You know, this is civic engagement at its best. This is community engagement at its best. This is neighbors getting to know neighbors, which boils down to the crux of many problems, is people not communicating with their neighbors. Another benefit to this, it is a crime deterrent, because you have people out on the streets, you have eyeballs out watching things that are happening in there. And then lastly, this enhances value. This brings value back to the property. We've all been downtown where a building has been torn down or burnt down, and it looks like the desert. That doesn't do anything for anybody. This will benefit us. Yeah, it's $135,000, but I'd rather it be that than somebody get injured in a building or these buildings go up in flames. So whether or not they come down, it's going to happen, but let's do some lot activation, and it sounds like there's people out there that really want to do this.
Other comments on the council? We have the public already, right?
You did, yes.
Call the roll.
Council from Ward 1?
Yes.
Ward 2?
Yes?
Ward 3?
Yes.
Ward 4?
Yes.
Ward 6?
Yes.
Ward 7?
No.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 6 to 1.
Agenda item number 16.
Item number 16, order authorizing the city administrator to execute an easement to the owner of 35 Beach Street for traffic circulation, rehabilitation, and maintenance and drainage of stormwater. Requested action to approve the order authorizing the city administrator to execute an easement to the owner of 35 Beach Street for traffic circulation, rehabilitation and maintenance, and drainage of stormwater.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion by Councilor Ray, seconded by Councilor Lyson. Can we get an overview of this agenda item?
Yes, Developers Collaborative is the owner of 35 Beach Street, which is collectively, most people know it as the Pamco Mill, just as you cross into Smart Payne Park. They have owned it since, I believe, 2014. They've had a variety of redevelopment options they've considered, and they've decided to move forward at this point. I do have Mike Lyons there. So he's with Developers Collaborative. He's really been the project manager on this. What they're looking to do is 33 units, studio 1 and 2 bedroom units there, 11 per floor with 10,000 square feet at street level that they're looking to turn into commercial space, really looking to try to turn it into incubator space tied to artists, or it's still a bit of a moving target, but they've got this desire to get people that are both living, working in the same building. To make the building work well, it historically had parking surrounding it. It turns out they were parking on land they didn't own. They really had an engineer take a hard look at this. It was included in your packet. If you'd like it to go up on the screen, I've got a PDF of it as well. I can load it up. But they're looking for 6 feet on the lower canal side of it, just an easement, which really came from our planning folks that said, look, you could have a nice safe passageway right next to the building. If we just move the parking 6 feet away from it, You have a little green space for people to walk where they're not walking through the parking area. That still leaves the city about 25, 26 feet for a green space canal between the building, between the parking lot and our canal. And then they needed 10 feet on the cross canal that runs down to the water, and that was really for drainage and so you can get a fire truck or something else around the building. They are really looking to go forward in the near term on this project. They're going to be in front of the planning board next week, but they really need to be able to show that, yes, we've got site control, and the city's willing to provide us a 10-foot easement on the south side of the building and a 6-foot easement on the east side of the building, so we can make the traffic, just make the whole project work better. That's effectively why we're here.
Questions on the council? Councilor Marcotte?
The map's hard to read.
It is hard to read.
Is that small strip of gray area that swings around the building, that's the travel lane we're talking about?
The 6-foot, that's the easement area that they would need to be able to push everything back, closer to the lower canal, the main canal. So, and that's the east side of the building as it's oriented in your map. The lower canal is on the top of the page.
Yeah.
And so that gray area is the 6-foot easement that's being requested there. And then on the right side of the building is where the 10-foot easement is needed to allow a truck to get
Okay, the
around.
width expands from 6 to 10 as it goes around the building.
Right.
And it's basically a travel lane because there would be property on either side of that easement that the city is not easing, correct?
Right, they own real estate all around the
Because
building.
I'm seeing with the page straight up, and I'm thinking of Oxford Street as north, even if it's not.
Yes.
We have a property line, white area, then gray area, then white area.
Yes.
So is the area that's being sought the white area between the property line and the first solid line, or just the gray area to the next solid line?
It's the gray area is what is being sought for the easement area. They own what's closer to the building, we own on the other side. So that 6-foot area is in what the city owns.
Yeah, but I'm seeing property after their property line, but before the shaded area.
The dashed line?
The dashed line is the property line, correct?
Mike, do you want to weigh in?
Can you put the map up on, it'd be easier to see perhaps if we have the PDF up.
Good evening, I'm Mike Line with Developers Collaborative. I think I understand the question. So there's property between the canal and that gray strip which you see. And Councilor, I believe that's your question, what's going on there?
Actually, the other side, that side that's closer to the property line.
Okay.
But it would be both sides of the gray area.
Yep, so the side closer to the building obviously is going to be travel lane. We need that gray area, which will be a portion of the travel lane that allows emergency vehicles to get around what I call the south side of the building. And as was discussed, that Link told you about the 6-foot easement, which the arrow is on right now. That came up last week in discussions with staff. It would be nice to just...
Could we maybe zoom in on that?
That's a good question.
So the 6-foot easement on what I'll call the east there was suggested by staff last week just to give the area between, you can see a knob on the building, a bump out on the building, which is going to be a front entrance, and there are steps that come down below that entrance. And by pushing the property line or allowing us the easement, it creates a safer flow of traffic around that knob in the building. And it also allows us, it doesn't show here, there's a parking plan that allows us to pull some parking off the building so that people who are driving the cars can get out and walk along the building versus in the driveway to get to the front door. So that was really just came up out for safety reasons, the easement to the right. Originally, we were just asking for the 10 feet below.
Right.
But this seems to make the most sense.
And Mike, I think where you're getting where it's complicated is you've got a dashed line that's closer to the building, then you've kind of got a mixed line that's bolder. That's the edge of the property line. And then the gray area is where the easement area is.
Is the property line the line that goes right alongside the building?
The property line is the line that goes right alongside the easement that we're talking about.
Right, so it's...
So
it's-
our 6-foot easement is right up against their property line.
So what's the other dashed line that's closer to the building? Or right up against the
I
building?
believe
on the west
that's,
side?
I think that mistakenly is marking the property boundary, which is actually 10 feet below that. So we have about 10 feet off the bottom of the building there.
Yeah, if you look, like, if you look at the city
Correct.
GIS, that dashed line is where the city GIS
I was
shows
trying to
it.
understand whether, we owned that area that Council Lyson just pointed out, or if the,
We own that area.
okay.
Yeah, and that's from a survey, not from GIS, so that, you've got 3 different
So
layers there.
that's probably a GIS blip.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
GIS isn't perfect, it's usually within a couple feet. But yeah, this was ARC Surveying who did this. Jim, are you back to old times?
I was needed a pointer, though.
Are you all set, Councilor Marcotte?
Yes.
Other questions on the council? To the public? Back to the council? Call the roll.
Counselor from Ward 1?
Yes.
Ward 2?
Yes.
Ward 3?
Yes.
Ward 4?
Yes.
Ward 6?
Yes.
Ward 7?
Yes.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 7-0.
Agenda item number 17.
Item number 17, reconsideration of final passage of the Land Use Code amendments regarding nursery schools. There are 2 items for requested action printed in your book. The first motion is to approve reconsideration of the vote taken at the June 16th, 2019 City Council meeting regarding final passage for Land Use Code amendments regarding nursery schools.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion by Councilor Beam, seconded by Councilor Marcotte. Discussion on the council. Can I just ask one question? So do we have new information on this item, or is this pretty much the same item we saw at our last meeting?
It's pretty much the same item that was discussed at the last meeting, unless somebody on the council or in the public wants to bring forward some new information, which I suspect might be the situation.
But the motion before us is just for reconsider, whether or not we're
any-
going to reconsider it.
Correct. What is appropriate for discussion at this point is just the motion to reconsider,
The merits of, right.
not the merits of the rezoning. This is, basic question is, should we reconsider this? So if anybody wants to support that, they should say why it should be reconsidered, and those who don't should say why it shouldn't.
Councilor Marcotte and then Councilor Beam.
The reason why it should be reconsidered is, at the last meeting, we voted subsequent to this item to send back to the planning board an expansion of zones, which happened last night at the planning board meeting. There was some discussion, there was even some reconsideration of NCA in the discussion. So at some, there was a motion for the expansion to the other 3 districts, which will come back to us in September. And I'm thinking that all 4 districts should be considered by the planning board in conjunction with each other. That's why, if we do agree to the reconsideration, I would suggest sending the item back to the planning board, as was outlined as one of the potentials in the administrator's email to us over the weekend. Because I think there are a whole lot of other considerations considering the expansion. That's why I think we should have a reconsideration. If reconsideration passes, we can do one of 3 things. We can approve the original motion, we can vote in opposition to the original motion, or we could table it. That was my idea last night, but then I saw the email this morning for the first time, and there was a suggestion of sending it back to the planning board, which I think actually makes more sense, so that they can deliberate this issue across 4 zones instead of having 2 measures.
Councilor Beam?
I wrote these out because I didn't think I could remember everything, because I have a lot of reasons why it should be reconsidered. And I thank you for, I thank Councilor Marcotte for giving me this chance to speak to the issue. At the last meeting of the City Council voted to permit nursery schools in a neighborhood conservation area. I voted with the majority on this issue. As it turned out, the issue is more complex than what it appeared at first glance. For these reasons, I asked the council to reconsider the definition of a nursery school that the council voted on and accepted in the last meeting. In short, I felt that the way it was written was not clear enough. I came to this conclusion after reading many times the state of Maine regulations governing nursery schools and talking to residents who were concerned about allowing nursery schools in the neighborhood conservation area. Although at this meeting, the city council is not specifically addressing the other districts, this discussion and any discussion that comes out of it will ultimately affect them as well. And that goes to Councilor Marcotte's issue that perhaps we should wait and consider all four together. I'll go over some of the main problems people have had with having nursery schools in an NCA district, if I can. I wrote these comments before I spoke to Mr. Green, and he clarified for me the meaning of conditional. I want to bring this up now because even though we all knew it was conditional, it wasn't clear to me what specifically the planning board would have to look at before granting a license to any nursery school. I will read this first and then discuss some of the wording I would recommend to be put right in the definition. So really quickly, if I can, I'd like to read what, and for people in the audience who need, I know this doesn't work well, I don't know if I'm not close enough. For people in the audience who are interested in knowing exactly what the planning board will consider, and it's pretty specific, I think that'll make everybody feel a lot better. Standards for conditional use permits, and I thank Mr. Green for sending this to me at the last minute. A conditional use permit shall be granted by the Board of Appeals or Planning Board unless the board finds that the granting of the permit would violate one or more of the following standards. Neither the proposed use nor the proposed site upon which the use will be located is of such a character that the use will have a significant adverse impact upon the value or quiet possession of surrounding properties, greater than would normally occur from such a use in the zoning district. The board may not find that this standard is satisfied unless it finds that, and there are many conditions. The size of the proposed use is comparable to surrounding uses, and the amount and type of traffic to be generated, hours of operation, expanse of pavement, and the number of parking spaces are comparable to surrounding uses. And the generation of noise, dust, odor, vibration, glare, smoke, litter, and other nuisances is comparable to surrounding uses. The impact of the use on the quality and quantity of groundwater available to abutting properties is comparable to surrounding uses. Unusual physical characteristics of the site, including site of the lot, that doesn't really come into, that's not really relevant because it's already been decided that the lot should be an acre. But the shape of the lot, topography, and soils do not aggravate adverse impacts on surrounding properties. The shape of the lot sometimes can adversely affect it, even though it's an acre. Vehicular and pedestrian access to, into, and within the site will be safe and will not be overburdened or create hazards because they are inadequate. The board may not find that this standard is satisfied unless it finds that, and there are specific things they have to find. Vehicular access to the site will be on roads which have adequate capacity to accommodate the additional traffic generated by the development. Adequate capacity means that intersections on major access routes to the site within 1/2 mile of any entrance road will function after development at a minimum of level of service C. If they are functioning at a level of service D or lower prior to the development, the project will not reduce the current level of service. The Board of Appeals or Planning Board may approve a conditional use permit for an application not meeting this requirement if the applicant demonstrates that a public agency has committed funds to construct the improvements necessary to bring the level of access to said standard, or the applicant will assume financial responsibility for the improvement necessary to bring the level of service to said standard and will guarantee the completion of the improvements within 1 year of approval of the permit. The topography of the site shall permit the construction of all driveways, entrances, or proposed streets to meet the standards of the City of Lewiston's policy for the design and construction of streets and sidewalks. That's pretty much what the planning board's going to go through after they receive an application. Right now, there's no application pending from anyone, and so planning board doesn't need to go through this process, I guess, to just go up or down on whether or not we want to do this. So I'll continue. I'm trying not to take too long, but so I first discuss the definition. The amount of noise and traffic, the problems that were discussed with me are these. The amount of noise and traffic a nursery school as opposed to a daycare would produce. I believe the motion needs to be rewritten with greater clarity to ensure that the rights of the nursery school owners and the rights of their neighbors are respected and hopefully reconciled. They need, we didn't have any of that in the definition. It's just kind of, it's an open issue. Any proposed revisions should include the following. Parents should be asked to pick up and drop off children without a lot of discussion on the driveway. There should be enough parking available for a parent to exit the car and have the discussion inside the center. Loud methods of transportation, such as motorcycles, should not be used to transport children, especially first thing in the morning. Problem 2, the definition as written specifies that the nursery school should be on 1 acre of land. I imagine that is so that the nursery school would not be too close to the abutting neighbors. Not all people in the NCA have 1 acre of land, and if they have only 1/4 acre, the easement from the nursery is very tight if the nursery school is built right next to their property. I would like to suggest a solution to these problems. The easement space between the nursery school property and the neighbors should be specified. In addition, driveways should be taken into consideration. Problem 3, there will be more traffic with twice-a-day pickups and deliveries. Solution, the numbers of children should be very clear. 6 children in the morning, 6 children in the afternoon, or, as the state of Maine regulations allow, 12 in the AM and 12 in the afternoon, as allowed by the state. The city should be clear whether the city will allow a nursery school to be in session during school holidays, school closings, and summer vacations, so the neighbors will know when they can expect the school to be opened or closed. If the school is closed during regular school closings, the yearly exposure to traffic will probably be reduced, and the neighbors can count on having a break during the summer vacation, when people are likely to be outdoors. If the council, I don't know if this is what I need to say or say, because I've never done this before, but if the council is willing to entertain some of these revisions, considering what the planning board has to do anyway, then we would have to table the vote, I think, to give coding and planning time to revise the current definition. This would also give members of the public time to speak to the definition before we vote. I offer these suggestions respectfully and have already spoken to Mr. Green to let him know that I only came to these conclusions after speaking to many people and that he did a good job writing the first draft. We just need more information in the draft. I would like to include more information in the draft. I also want the council and public to know that my vote and reconsideration were not frivolous. When I first voted, I did not have all the information that I do now. With these revisions and feedback before the council votes, I feel that we will have made sure that we have a smooth manner to consider nursery schools in all the districts we will be voting on tonight, including the NCA. I think it would be foolish to just pass this for the NCA and then to have to reconsider for all the other districts. I guess that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Anyone else on the council? Councilor Lyson?
Yeah, Doug, could you explain a little bit on, I'm a little confused about what the planning board still has to do, or what, you know, let's say it continues as it was voted on.
Right.
What is the planning
When the staff worked with the applicant who presented a petition and the text amendment, the staff made sure that we were trying to balance out if it was possible to have a nursery school that would be more similar in nature to daycare type facilities. And we wanted to build in there that there would be additional review by the planning board by going through a conditional use process, which Councilor Beam just went into the nuances, all the wording of what's in there. But basically, we felt it was important to balance out protecting the neighborhood interest versus someone wanting to run a nursery school by going through the planning board, the conditional use, which in summary looks at any possible negative impacts on surrounding property, whether it's traffic, noise, any other impacts. And so we felt that it was reasonable to have the planning board have to weigh in on an applicant on how they meet the criteria, and an applicant would have to meet those 5 basic criterias of conditional use. And just to add to that, when we first brought this before you, it was limited to generally the NCA district because that's where the applicant resided. We realized afterwards that while nursery schools would be a conditional use in the suburban residential, low-density residential, and medium-density residential, we neglected to take off a special note 22, which for those 3 zones that I mentioned, that would have nursery schools could only be associated with schools, churches, or larger facilities within those neighborhood districts. So we felt to keep it fair, we wanted, and that was something that the council requested the staff do, is to come back to the planning board and then consequently to you to revise that text amendment for nursery schools to keep it even between NCA, suburban residential, low density, and medium density residential for those what we consider lower density neighborhoods. Plus, we added to the definition that it had to be at least an acre, would be limited to 12 students per session as per the July 16th meeting, and then also it would have to be associated with a single-family residence. It couldn't just be some new building that was going to come up for the nursery school.
Councilor Pattengill.
So just a couple questions to clarify what you'd like us to add in the reconsideration. You'd like us to control people talking outside of buildings on private property, and then you would also like for us to control vehicles that people drive on private property as well?
That makes it sound really bad, and I'm sure that's what you're trying to do.
It does.
But when we're drawing ways to, I mean, we're trying to figure out whether or not we want to have a certain business establishment in a certain area because we got zoning regulations, then we have to consider everything about it that would impact neighbors, and loud noises do impact neighbors. And I want to say something about the 1 acre land thing. It's great if you have 1 acre of land, but if your house and the nursing home are abutting the neighbor who has 1/4 of an acre of land, it doesn't help that the rest of the area is 1 acre. They're still very close, as if they were like this. And yes, I imagine we do have ways to curb loud talking and loud vehicles. If we
Right.
can't do it legally, then we won't do it, right?
But I believe we already have ordinances that take care of loud noises. But I'm just looking for clarification, though.
I would like the nursing, if we get say nursing homes, if we give a conditional licensing to a nursing home, as a nursery school, then I think that the nursery school, the people who own the nursery school, should be cognizant of their duties as well as you know, the rest of it. So, yeah, I guess it wouldn't be an ordinance, it wouldn't be a law, they wouldn't be arrested, but perhaps we could ask them to be quiet or to do something a little differently.
Again, I'm
And I think we
just
always do.
looking for clarification.
Yeah, well,
And
you got it.
then you said you'd like it to be 12 students in the morning and 12 students in the afternoon per the state regulations?
No, I just said that we should know what what the nursing, the nursery school people have decided to do. They can't have as many as 12. They can have fewer.
Right,
And
you
there
just
was-
referenced the state regulations, because that's 20 from the state, 20 per session. The applicant agreed to go down to 12, I believe.
You don't have an applicant, and that's the issue.
Per the original agreement.
We don't have anybody who's, Mrs. Roberts
Okay, so
has not applied for a license
in the
at the moment.
original wording, it went down to 12. But
I
I'm
believe
just
the
trying to
state-
that's what I'm trying to verify.
Okay, I believe the state, as far as nursery schools, and maybe, Mr. Green, you know, do they allow as many as 12 children or as many as 20 per session?
Depending on the size of the facility,
Uh-huh.
the state can allow above 12. It could be 20, and then depending on the facility and staffing, it could be greater.
Okay.
At the original application, the request was for 20, and at the final meeting, the applicant agreed to lower the per session amount of students down to 12. And if I could add one other thing that I didn't mention about conditional use is that the Planning Board or Board of Appeals has the authority to also apply additional conditions such as density, hours of operation. So depending on the circumstances, it's all about the particular case, the property, and what the operation is proposing, that those deciding bodies can add additional conditions if they feel it's warranted.
But they have to stick to the conditions that we have in our, that I just read.
Correct. I believe that would be addressed. The deciding body looks at noise, setbacks, screening, buffering, traffic, again, noise, all those kind of things have to be addressed by the applicant in their application and then discussed and worked out with between the neighbors, the applicant, and the deciding body.
And that's all that I'm asking for. I guess I'm asking for a clarity on the issue of what happens at the planning board, because I wasn't sure on that, and I'm sure other people weren't sure about what happens, because there are some very specific things they have to look at, and noise, and density, and is one of them. So it needs to be, if we could rewrite this so that people understand that what's going to be looked at, then.
It certainly is the council's,
Yeah.
what you're discussing and looking to vote on tonight
I
would
guess
be
that's what I'm
whether you
looking
want
for.
to go back and the staff could take another look at how this was presented and written.
Can I
But
just-
I've also explained how the application, the text amendment was intended to function.
Yeah, I guess I satisfied my requirement by at least making it public, in case somebody doesn't know that these things have to be addressed and they have to be worked out. And it's just a matter of sharing and being nice.
Can I just ask one clarifying question? So, based upon what you just said, Doug, all of those requirements get addressed once the applicant has applied and the planning board is reviewing it. So all of those things happen based upon the vote that we took
Correct,
a month ago?
yes.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Lysak.
Yeah, you know, I mean, I think we have had due process on this issue. A lot of the issues that you raised are covered.
Yes, they are.
In zoning and planning, this is not a perfect science. This is, the good thing is that nothing is set in stone either. I mean, to me, I think there's not enough new information for me to say that we need to reconsider. However, I mean, down the road, when this process goes, and if there is issues and problems, then we can take a look at it. But as far as I'm concerned, I would vote, against. I understand your concerns. I understand the concerns of the public who is here. In a very long period of time that we talked about this. I think we debated it, we discussed it for quite a long time that evening. So I'm ready to, let's see how it works out. Let's see how the planning board does that. And again, it has to be triggered by an application too. And I think that's an issue. We've got to protect the rights of also the petitioner and the applicant. So that fine balance is always difficult. And again, like I said, not a perfect science, but I'm not ready to kind of force a reconsideration because of the due process and because of the information that both staff and the council was given. So,
Councilor Marcotte.
Okay. I think a reconsideration is in order. First meeting when it came to us, I was so uninformed, I voted in favor of it. Second meeting, we received a little more information, and I voted in opposition. I'm learning more every day. I learned more last night at the planning board. The planning board actually took up the other three zones, and the discussion took on new and different directions. I think all four of these zones should be deliberated by the planning board together. That's why I think this should be reconsidered. We'd have a better product in the end. Earlier, can't read my own handwriting. Earlier, we heard some bite back at the councilor who lives in the ward that's most impacted by the original applicant. Applicant meaning the person who wanted the zoning change because there is no application for the actual nursery school. I support private nursery schools all over. When I voted in favor of expanding it to the other zones, I thought it was more appropriate in those other zones. That's why I supported it. With respect to the NCA, it's a neighborhood conservation A. Conservation's in that phrase for a reason. People have should be able to expect the proper and quiet enjoyment of their property. I think Councilor Beam made some good points about the impact to the smaller properties that may abut a 1 acre property. We can look at Robinson Gardens, which I believe is NCA, and is a dead end, and this would be permitted in those zones as well. I mean, yes, those, what are they called, Doug? The items that will be considered by the planning board during the application?
It would be,
The standards.
Conditional use standards or
Yeah,
criteria.
conditional use standards. Unless we take a good look at them, the planning board should take a good look at them before the recommendation comes back to us and have a good, solid document in the end, rather than something that they have no choice. Just like at the beginning of the planning board, we heard the soundbite that I only heard a couple times in my 8.5 years, because it's usually only given during development review, and it was given as a preface to everything that was on the agenda last night, that they cannot deny development review that meets criteria. But last night, all three of the agenda items were a planning board issue as far as the proper planning and development, economic and otherwise, for this community. We have citizens here live throughout the city, not just along Pond Road and Donnelly, but other portions of the city that are concerned about their ability in the future to enjoy the quiet enjoyment of their properties down the road, whether it's the commercialization of traffic and noise right outside their window. I think there needs to be a further deliberation by the planning board. It's not too much to ask. It'll come back to us in September. I believe there's a planning board meeting on the 26th. and our meetings is on September 3rd, and we can get a complete package of all 4 zones. And I'm not sure that anything much is going to change. Maybe just tighten up some of the expectations and standards. So to deny a reconsideration is just flying in the face of some of the councilors here trying to represent their constituents, the people that live in their ward and want to enjoy their life here in Lewiston and not be so impacted at every turn, whether it's the previous items on our agenda tonight or it's this one.
Anyone else on the council? To the public, and I just want to, did we already, yes.
No, you can remind them.
I just want to remind folks that we're talking only about the reconsideration, not presenting new evidence at this, or comments at this time.
Rachel Nadeau, I live at 56 Robinson Gardens, the only property on Robinson Gardens that has over an acre. I also own the property at 3 Donnelly Street where my father lives. This is what I want to say about this reconsideration. For 18 months, beginning in April of 2007, I served on the Downtown Neighborhood Task Force, which was created as a means to generate ideas on how to improve the downtown residential area, roughly from Ash to Adams Streets and from Park to Bartlett Streets, which is an area of about 70 acres. The task force held regular meetings, hosted gatherings, and online surveys to encourage dialogue among residents, landlords, youth, businesses, city departments, and nonprofits. Our goal was to include all who wanted a voice in their neighborhood. More than 200 stakeholders were engaged in the process. The city spent a lot of money and hired 2 consultants to work with us and produce a report with our recommendations. And the people who lived in the neighborhood felt like they were being heard. 10 years later, changes are being made to the Neighborhood Conservation A districts, which encompass a far larger area than the downtown neighborhood, and which could impact the people who live there greatly, yet not one conversation has taken place. This is an issue that needs to be further discussed before we willy-nilly add or change language to the NCA district. We don't feel like we are being heard. This issue has very quietly slipped by us with little opposition until now. 3 minutes to speak in front of the people who make our decisions is not a conversation. About a dozen neighbors turned out for the last meeting and spoke out against adding this language to the NCA, and as a body, the council didn't listen. You still voted for putting it in. So before we add language that allows the NCA to be opened up to businesses that will bring significant traffic to our neighborhoods and that will reduce property values, there needs to be studies, there needs to be input from stakeholders, there needs to be conversations with neighbors. The traffic and noise that currently infiltrates my father's backyard from the daycare twice a day, every weekday, has changed the quality of his life negatively. The elderly are often invisible in these conversations. No one here is against having more nursery schools in the city, but before we make a decision to double the traffic anywhere in the NCA, not just my father's house, we need to back this process up so everyone is heard. And I am here to ensure my father is not invisible. We need to work together to make sure this is done the right way in a manner that will not work against the conservation of the neighborhoods in here, and that will work for everybody.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public want to speak on the reconsideration? Back to the council. Oh, sorry.
Do I state my name and address?
That would be great.
Okay. Hi, I'm MJ Langley. I reside at 411 Pond Road. Totally Kids, McMahon, Montello, Connors, Farwell, Geiger, Acadia Academy, Central Maine Christian Academy, Androscoggin Head Start, Pettingill Academy, owned by Zach Pettingill, Donna's Daycare and Preschool, All Are Our Precious, Hillview Preschool, Lewiston High School preschool, St. Dom's preschool, Leavers Daycare and preschool, Early Head Start preschool, Sand Dollars preschool, Tiny Towns, Tiny Toes preschool, Margaret Murphy preschool, Promise Early Education preschool, are all schools for children nursery school age, 3 to 5, in the Lewiston school area. All of those are located in commercial areas. They are not in residential areas. When you purchase a home, you choose a home where something you love, you know what you're signing up for. When you choose in a commercial area, you also know what you're signing up for. You can have businesses near you. When I purchased my house, I know that there's no businesses in my neighborhood. That is one of the areas that's being reconsidered. So to open this up and have a surprise of a school that's opening up, and again, I'm all for the kids, I'm all for preschool, daycares, anything that has to do with the kids, that's great, but it should stay in our commercial areas. It shouldn't be in a residential area. And as I come up here tonight, there's a lot of discussion that we're not discussing the NCA district. But Doug comes up every single time we have a meeting, and he brings it up. So there's no discussion from the people, but there seems to be discussion inside the House here, which is a little unfair. As well as you, Zach, you seem to be a little bit of a conflict of interest, with there being a rumor said that you are excited for a daycare to close.
So we're not going to address rumors
Okay.
on this body.
Okay. So again, I think Zach Pettingill has a little bit of a conflict of interest due to him owning the same kind of facility that we are discussing tonight. So with that being said, I thank you for your time, and that's it.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public? Sure.
My name is Crystal. I live at 24 Maplewood Road. It is at the corner of Webster and Pond. Both of my children, ages 8 and 10, have been attending Michelle's Roberts Daycare since they were 3 months old. To this day, my children attend during the summer months because there is nowhere else they would rather be. She has loved my children and so many other children like her own. She is family to us. Over the last 10 years, I have witnessed Michelle's compassion for children and her community. She has selflessly dedicated her life to so many children that she cares for. To my disgust, I witnessed Mrs. Nato, who is here tonight, her neighbors.
So this part of the public comment is related only to the reconsideration, not to the rezoning.
Filming of children is not part of the discussion tonight by
No,
Mrs. Nato.
Not right now. We're talking
My
about
children.
the reconsideration
Okay.
specifically.
That should be part of the reconsideration tonight. I feel like there's been a huge disservice with that. That should be considered her videotaping and sending that information to the council without consent of parents.
So, City Administrator Barrett, if this resident has a complaint about another resident that she feels something inappropriate has happened, where should she report that?
To be quite honest, I'm not totally sure in that particular situation. It is more likely to be a civil violation than I would think a criminal violation, but I don't have my law degree, so I could be wrong. So I'm sorry, I can't really give any good advice.
So if we were to take her contact information, would we be able to point her in the right direction to file?
We could certainly ask the city attorney for his opinion.
Okay. So
I send my children to this daycare to be safe, not to be videotaped by a neighbor, so I'm very concerned about her ability to come up here and speak.
So if you could leave your contact information with the city administrator, that would be great.
Okay, thank you.
Other public comment? Back to the council. Councilor Ray.
I apologize. Can I ask a question of Doug?
Yes.
Great. This would be new information for me, I feel like. How would this petition change if I were the petitioner bringing forward the text?
Could you speak in?
Sorry. How would this petition, or how would this procedure change if I was the petitioner bringing forward a text amendment and had no affiliation with nursery schools?
Well, I would say that a petitioner starts the process, and it moves on to the planning board for a recommendation, then on to the city council. It is noted that the applicant, made an adjustment lowering down to 12. But from this point forward, the decision-making process is really now, I would say, with the city council. And, I'm hearing interest in rediscussion of a consolidated discussion about NCA, medium density, low density, and suburban residential. And that's certainly something that the staff would lead, examining the things that you've talked about tonight, if that's what you wanted to do. The staff is at your beck and call, basically, to do as you wish.
Anyone has the right to file a rezoning petition. They are all handled the same way.
They go through staff recommendation to planning board to the council, and then is the will of the council to vote on that, which the council did at the July 6th meeting.
Correct.
16th meeting. Great. Okay. That helps me. Thank you.
Other questions from the council? Councilor Patino.
I guess just a point of clarity, for it to be a conflict issue, I would have to gain fiduciary from this, I guess, per se. Because to put it out there, I do own a daycare. I don't own a nursery school. They don't, I'm flabbergasted at the personal attack, I guess. So just looking for a little bit of clarity from the city administrator. I can certainly recuse myself from the vote, but I am not gaining from this in any way.
Normally, yes, there would have to be some consideration of financial impact, which could either be positive or negative. So, I mean, obviously, you're not in the nursing school business. Someone might argue that a nursery school could potentially have a negative impact on your business.
I'm okay with competition.
Anyone else on the council? Councilor LaJoy, then Councilor Bean.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We did listen last time at the meeting, and basically a statement was made that we didn't listen. We listened because we understood on this side what the process was with the planning board and the appeals board, which was to give every citizen who comes in to apply for a license the best and possible ability to begin a business, if that's the side they're on, and or the citizens that live around those properties the ability to speak against the process. And those items are at the level of the planning board and or the appeals board. And that's why I moved it in that direction. Thank you.
Councilor Bean.
I'm allowed to speak again.
Can I just say one thing before I give you your second chance? So a statement was also made that Farwell School is in a commercial zone. I live behind Farwell School. I can assure you that that is not a commercial zone. That is a residential neighborhood. And Farwell School was built after many of the people, excuse me? Right. Right. So, as I was saying, and many of those homes were built before Farwell School went in there, because Farwell School is a fairly new school. So this idea of moving into a neighborhood that is going to remain stagnant for the rest of the time that you're there is not standard across any city or any municipality. So I just, that was a false statement. I would say the same thing is true of Geiger School, which is on College Street. It certainly is a much larger acre lot, but it is not commercial by any stretch. So I just wanted to clarify that. Councilor Beam.
I just want to say one final thing, that this definition has the possibility of causing a lot of problems between neighbors. And if we include 3 more zones, is bound to produce a lot of acrimony. And anything we can do to have it not happen, and to have such a clear method of working this through, that neighbors will know that they have to work it through together with the planning board. Now, I'm just confused, because like Councilor LaJoy, you said that, can I speak to Councilor LaJoy? Okay. That you said that the planning board would go through the process of examining whether the business is appropriate or not, and that's what we were told. Now, it seems like, and I may be confused about this, but it seems like we voted and then sent it to the planning board. Did the planning board send us anything of studies that were done or anything at all before we voted to go ahead and did we have that in our packets that I missed?
They had a hearing.
Before well, that was the final vote, wasn't it, 2 weeks ago?
So Doug, can you clarify what the process has been?
Yes.
So what we sent back to the planning board was for them to examine the other.
Correct. At
Other
your July
zones.
16th meeting, you took the final vote, and you passed the ordinance that allows nursery schools in the NCA district as a conditional use with some specific restrictions by the definitions that were included. The second motion that the City Council passed was instructing the Planning Board to revisit the nursery school ordinance to include the suburban residential, low-density residential, and medium-density residential. That was heard last night. There were 5 members present. The vote was 3-2 in favor of that, but because there wasn't 4 votes to get a majority of a vote, the motion to approve did not pass. So in essence, it did not pass. The next step normally would be for the recommendation, which the staff prepared a draft of that today after last night's meeting, would be to send that recommendation on to you. We anticipated that would be at the September 3rd meeting, that you would revisit that. It's only a recommendation, and you would have your consideration on that secondary ordinance change to allow those 3 other residential districts for nursery schools. That's the process.
Okay, and the reason that we didn't they didn't study all these conditions is because we have no application.
Yeah, nothing's been filed, and the applicant has informed us that she wasn't looking to do anything until next year.
So that's when the applicant and the neighbor can go to the planning board and discuss the
Right.
issues that are, and right now tonight, well, we're just deciding whether or not to reconsider a vote because it has passed, this conservation, it has passed, but we didn't need a review by the planning board because we didn't have an application.
Yeah,
As soon as we get an application, though, the planning board will have to review all of these little issues that I discussed and try to work with the parties, I hope, to have them work it out. Is that correct?
That would be a fair way to look at the process. When an application is submitted for a conditional use, also letters to all abutters and folks within 300 feet get letters notifying them that there's an application's been submitted for a conditional use for a nursery school, and they would have the ability to come to our office and look at the application. We would work with anybody who calls us up. And then there would be the deliberation, a public hearing set, and people would know what date they could come to the planning board meeting for that consideration of the conditional use. And the neighbors would be able to make their case, the applicant makes their case, the planning board asks questions and deliberates, and they look to see if they meet all the criteria or if additional conditions would be appropriate to resolve any concerns, possibly.
Right, and the businesses are given time to, actually a little bit of time to meet those criteria that they're not meeting, is that correct?
I'm sorry?
The businesses are given some time to meet the criteria.
Well, the applicant knows what those criteria are, and it's their responsibility to fill out a narrative that addresses all those concerns and how they're meeting those things, and they have a site plan that would show how traffic moves around, where the parking's going to be, if there's going to be screening, all those elements. You combine the site plan with a narrative to put together a complete package, and that can be evaluated by neighbors, by the planning board.
So these conditions are not meant to be punitive toward applicants. They're just there to make sure that applicants and the neighborhood get along well together, and that it can be resolved, perhaps.
By its definition, a conditional use, it's not a permitted use. It's only under certain conditions. If you meet the conditions, then that specific use would be allowable, but you've got to go through the process of meeting criteria for that specific place and that specific use.
And I wasn't sure if you had originally asked, but the original rezoning for the NCA district was reviewed by the planning board.
Yes.
That's a normal part of the process.
Councilor Marcotte.
As far as the discussion tonight by members of the audience and maybe a counselor, the reference to schools being commercial zones is just simply a misspeak. I mean, some of us are not as up to the lexicon or the vocabulary of code and planning and city dealings. What's at concern here is having a parcel that may be 1 acre. As I heard tonight, there's only one on Robinson Garden. I thought there was more. But if that property owner wanted to put up a nursery school, a private nursery school, and that increased traffic comes in and out of Robinson Garden, there's a road pattern through the NCA lot as exists here in Ward 6, that's a concern. I've never seen a conditional zoning item turned down by the planning board. Like Mr. Green says, the applicant simply needs to make sure that they check off all the things they're supposed to do, and as long as they do so, the planning board will approve. So that's just a slam dunk. As far as due process, I mean, because the rules are what they are, and that was discussed at the planning board last night as well, that maybe some of the rules need to change as far as notice. These residents didn't know that it was coming to the planning board initially through petition. They didn't even realize that it was coming to us for first reading. They came to the second one in a panic, and we voted 5-1, I believe was the result. And now they're looking for an ability to address this more fully. And what I'm sensing tonight is we're not even going to agree to a reconsideration and put this item back on the floor to discuss, to vote up or down, or send it to the planning board to give it back to us as a combined product. Some of the discussion last night on the other 3 zones, which seemed to be more appropriate zones for this use, was somewhat turned down because they didn't have that 4th vote. I don't know if that requires us to have a super vote, or if it had to be a motion in the negative for that super vote to take place. But all things considered, the least we can do for our tax-paying residents is to give them another shot at this. Now, we're not stopping anybody's actual application for a business, because we've heard that it's not going to happen for maybe a year, the next season. And again, we're impacting an NCA district. If you if you live on Goulet Street, and halfway down Goulet Street, there's a 1 acre property, they could petition for a private school right there. 12 kids in the morning, 12 at night, if that's what the rules state. Apparently, the state allows 20 or even more, depending on the amount of adult supervision. Obviously, we need to have public schools where they're situated, and there's a whole lot more development review that goes into that. The parcels are much bigger, they're accommodating. But you're not having a patchwork of schools through an area that people have become accustomed to living in the environment that is considered NCA. That's why it's NCA versus NCB or any of the others, medium density, low density, downtown residential. I mean, the least we can do is to allow these residents to pitch the planning board in a holistic view of all 4 of these zones. It's ridiculous to just shut them down like this. These are our residents. This is not somebody from out of town looking to make money building subsidized housing in Lewiston, for crying out loud.
Nope, it definitely is not. And I would also say that, so I've been pretty liberal, I think, with my entertaining of all the comments on the council and all of the comments to the public in relation to the reconsideration, because I feel like all of these things come into play as we consider whether we're going to listen to this item again. And I will say that we have sat here for the last hour listening to this item again because I have been so liberal in allowing the public comment and the council to comment. That being said, any other comment from the council? Call the roll.
Counselor from Ward 1?
No.
Ward 2?
No.
Ward 3?
No.
Ward 4?
No?
Ward 6?
Yes?
Ward 7?
Yes.
Madam Mayor?
No.
Motion failed by a vote of 2 to 5.
Agenda item number 18.
Item number 18, annual appointments for the Lewiston Auburn Railroad Company Board of Directors. For requested action, to accept the nominations from the mayor and to elect the following residents to serve on the Lewiston Auburn Railroad Company Board of Directors. Monique Roy, 3-year term expiring 2022, and Bruce Damon, 3-year term expiring 2022.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion by Councilor
Madam
Reyes.
Mayor?
Yep,
Are we taking these separately?
we can. Is that your preference?
Yes.
Sure, okay, so we'll just withdraw Counselor Ray's motion. So we'll break those down at the request of the counselor. So requested action to accept the nomination from the mayor and to elect the following resident to serve on the Lewiston Auburn Railroad Company Board of Directors. Monique Roy, 3-year term expiring 2020.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion by Councilor Reyes, seconded by Councilor Lyson. Discussion on the council. Councilor Marcotte?
Is this a renomination?
No.
This is, can we get a bio on Monique Roy?
She's currently serving on the Lewiston School Committee.
I have a general idea who she is.
She
But it
represents Ward
would be
2.
nice to have a little bio in the future.
When I make appointments, I don't require bios, so that's why there's not one in front of you. Other comments on the council? To the public? Back to the council? Call the roll.
Counsel from Ward 1?
Yes.
Ward 2?
Yes.
Ward 3?
Yes.
Ward 4?
Yes.
Ward 6?
Yes?
Ward 7?
Yes.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 7 to 0. Next item is to accept the nomination from the mayor and to elect the following resident to serve on the Lewiston Auburn Railroad Company Board of Directors. Bruce Damon, 3-year term expiring 2022.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion by Councilor Marcotte, seconded by Councilor Ray. Discussion on the council? To the public? Back to the council? Call the roll.
Counsel from Ward 1?
Yes.
Ward 2?
Yes.
Ward 3?
Yes.
Ward 4?
Yes.
Ward 6?
Yes?
Ward 7?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, sorry.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
My ward too, huh?
Passed by a vote of 7 to 0.
The accidental mayor.
What was that?
You heard me.
I didn't hear you, actually.
Let's go to the tape.
The accidental mayor.
Yep.
The control.
That's right.
The control freak.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
I have a report and update.
Great, I actually wanted to, yes, go ahead.
Great. From the school committee, As some of you hopefully have heard, we had an August 12th personnel meeting last night for the school committee, and we filled half of the open positions, so no need to worry, we're working on it. It's just a timing issue with filling positions for the school department. We also attended the Lewiston High School August graduation last night, which was a wonderful ceremony at the Don Roof Field, and I wanted to thank Councilors LaJoy and Mayor Cloutier for being in attendance and supporting those students who worked so hard to get there. We also have an upcoming August 19th regular meeting at the Dingley Building. We will have a workshop and then our regular meeting. Hopefully we'll continue to fill those open positions.
Any other reports and updates? So for agenda item number 20, other city business councilors or others may have relating to Lewiston City Government. We did not get to the, when we discussed the housing committee, the one thing we did not talk about that City Administrator Barrett brought up was a member of the rental registration. So I think people should come to the meeting on September 3rd prepared to talk about that. Counselor from Ward 1.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to move that the council go into executive session pursuant to MRSA Title I, Section 4056C, to discuss an economic development issue which the premature disclosure of the information would prejudice the competitive bargaining position of the city.
Second. I have a motion by Counselor Lyson, seconded by Counselor Ray. All those in favor?
Motion passed by a vote of 7-0.